This episode is brought to you in part by audiobook narrator Mike Scott. When selecting your next audiobook, choose from some of the great titles narrated by audiobook narrator Mike Scott, like Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864. And if you're an author or publisher interested in having your written works produced as audiobooks, give Mike a shout at MikeScottVoice.com. Mike Scott, the voice of history. And Civil War Trails. It's the world's largest open-air museum, and they offer over 1,300 sites across 6 states. Drive the Gettysburg campaign turn by turn, paddle to Frederick Douglass's birthplace, or hike to remote earthworks and artillery positions. Visit civilwartrails.org to request a brochure and explore their interactive map. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Boy, that's loud. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. I am your host, Matt. And today we are talking about Dan the Man Sickles. You either love him or you hate him or you don't know anything or you don't care. Either way. So basically like every other human being. But the people that love him or hate him do so, I think, with a little more passion.
A lot more.
Yeah, than your average human being that you either love or hate. There's certain ones that are just, whatever. So, of course, who else in the world would we get to come on and do this special biographical Ask a Gettysburg guide about Dan Sickles than the great Jim Hessler. Hello, Jim. Welcome.
Hey, Matt. Hello, guys. Thank you, guys.
We were just saying this is your 5th time on the show.
Yeah, the 5-Timer Club.
The 5-Timer Club. Yeah. And this is Ask a Guide number 50. So you are our half a century.
So if I'm here now 5 times, will this finally dispel rumors that we have a passionate rivalry and we hate each other?
No, it won't.
It won't. They'll never die.
No.
That was a rhetorical question. But yeah, no.
It's because it's not us, it's the listeners.
That's right. The listeners
the ones.
They're so passionate about what we do. Yes,
they love us so much that they want us to hate each other.
I think they do.
If that makes sense.
No, I think that does make sense.
To them.
To some of
them.
But
not
just some
to
of
me.
them.
Yeah.
Just some of them. Can't we just get along?
Can't we all just get along? That's what I want to know.
Which is a great segue for meat and Sickles. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Absolutely. Before we get into the show there, ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to remind you, follow us Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Make sure you have your notifications turned on. Also, if you use the Apple Podcast app, please leave a 5-star review. Reviews, liking, sharing, and subscribing are the best way to help us grow our audience. Don't forget that our weekly live show about what's happening in Gettysburg in 2022 is now going to start broadcasting on YouTube every Friday instead of Facebook because Facebook sucks.
Tell us what you really think about Facebook.
I think it sucks. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube, and you got to click the notification bell so that you know when we go live. Okay, so Jim.
Yes.
I mean, the amount of questions that have come in are indubitable. And
I didn't look at a single one, wink, wink.
Right.
So we're just going to do this totally off the cuff.
You're getting these totally cold.
That's right.
But Sickles is a guy who garners a lot of interest from people all over the place.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like a Custer guy.
Polarizing. Strong personality.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the difference is that, Custer is probably more vilified in the 20th century because we looked at him through a modern filter.
Yeah.
But Sickles.
Sickles.
Sickles. Oh, I had to record that. I should have had that lined up. But Sickles is no matter what era you're looking at him through a filter of that era. What am I trying to say?
I don't know.
No matter.
Are you trying to say people always hated him? Is that what you're trying to say?
He's a douchebag no matter how you slice it. No matter what era you're using to look at him.
Did you have to use that word to describe him? Did you have to use that word?
What would you rather me use?
A colorful personality.
Okay. He's a colorful personality that many would describe as a douchebag.
But certainly in his lifetime, he was polarizing, he was controversial. But there were people in his lifetime that, liked him, might not be the right word, but that looked at him positively, or at least favorably. A lot of the men who served under him liked him. And I think that's something that history somewhere lost with Sickles. He became, in the 20th century, a guy that everybody hates, but I don't think during his lifetime that was the case. I definitely think it was more mixed.
So you don't think that the people, like, what did What did Francis Scott Key think of him?
Well, I don't know what Francis Scott Key thought of him, but you know what his son Philip Barton Key thought of him, right? Right.
So no, we don't know that though. We don't know what Francis thought of him.
When did Francis Scott Key die?
Oh, did he die before that?
I think he might have.
Oh, I thought he was still around.
Sure.
Oh, well, wait, no, yeah.
All right, Eric the producer is Googling.
There you go.
Pick up the magic box.
Because that was when, Philip was what, like in his 40s?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right.
Francis Scott Key died January 11th, 1843.
There you go. So not only was he dead, he was long dead. He was long dead.
Oh, okay.
He was long dead.
Touche.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm learning, you're learning, so let's learn together.
But generations of the Key, which I think this is where you're going. Generations of the Key family, the Lions of Maryland do not look favorably on Dan Sickles. And I know some of the Key descendants. I do, and they hate Sickles.
They do.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, they might. If you've ever seen my giant cardboard Sickles, Kyle Key just like grabbed it and he tried to tear. I had to pull them apart. It was sad. It was frightening.
He's just beating up a piece of cardboard.
Exactly.
Poor fella. Well, all right. So let's get into Dan Sickles, because there's a lot of questions that are going to be after the break. So let's get into it now. Again, this is a biographical one, our second biographical Ask a Guide. So
who was the first?
John Gordon.
Oh, okay.
With Jim Pangburn.
What?
Yeah. And people really liked it, and they're like, "You got to do another bio,
more bio, and it's got to be Sickles.
And it's got to be.
We hate Sickles, but it's got to be Sickles.
But we got to hear about
That's
him.
pretty much the way
I need to hear why I hate him.
Yeah, exactly.
So
why do I hate him so?
So you, you're a big Sickles nut. What attracts you to Sickles?
Well, okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Sickles nut would be the wrong. I'm Sickles biographer.
Yeah.
And so people assume. Did Mike just laugh at that? People assume. People assume I've always been into Sickles, or that I'm into Sickles, or that sort of thing. When I became a battlefield guide,
right,
in 2003, I found that I liked telling Sickles stories because you get all these different dynamics: the Key murder, infidelity, adultery, political,
some
shenanigans,
good stuff,
the battle, all that good stuff. And I found that I liked it, and I found too that it was a good way to kind of draw in a broad audience. Like if you're in the car and maybe one member of the family is, into the battle tactics and the peach orchard, but the other one isn't. You bring in Sickles' personality, and the person who's falling asleep kind of goes, "Ooh, sex, adultery," and then you kind of get into it. So I found I liked telling Sickles stories.
Okay.
I really didn't know anything about Sickles before I became a battlefield guide, so I am not a Sickles nut.
Okay, so it wasn't a lifelong thing.
No,
not like Custer.
Exactly, exactly. Not sleeping with my Dan Sickles pillowcase or any of that stuff. But anyways, where were we going with this? Anyways, so
you were saying that he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, and so at the time I found that I thought a lot of the books and the things that out there on Sickles were either old, outdated, or really superficial and shallow. Because the whole we hate Sickles was kind of like a very shallow kind of standard take. I just wanted to learn more about him. And as Matt would say, aren't we learning together?
That's
right. Or something like that.
Something like that. All right, so where's he born? Where's he from?
New York City.
New York. Oh, city. He's from the city.
Yeah.
And what year was he born in?
I like the way he did that. Well, take your pick. We're not some dispute on the birthday. Let's say 1819. Generally accepted as October 20th, 1819, which would make him just shy of 44 years old at Gettysburg.
And the other date that he would use would be 1825, I think. And is there some kind of thought that maybe he would go around saying that so that he could marry younger women?
Yeah, that's one theory. Yeah. I think there's one theory that like later on in life he's lying about the age a little bit, or maybe he just forgot. He's 95. He didn't have one of these that like Eric did to see when Francis Scott Key died. He didn't have one of these, so maybe he just forgot.
His own Wikipedia.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or his own copy of Sickles at Gettysburg.
There you go.
Nice plug. Whoever's book this is.
That's mine. I'd like you to sign it.
I thought I already signed that. I thought I signed that last time.
That's the Peach Orchard one.
All right.
Sorry.
Be happy to sign
I got that one since the Peach Orchard one.
Oh, he didn't own all my books.
No, I did not. No.
All right. Where were we?
So he's born in New York.
Yeah.
What are his parents doing? What does his father do?
Yeah, his father is a relatively prosperous guy, banker, real estate developer, which you would consider a real estate developer back in the mid 1800s. But his father is relatively prosperous. Sickles is an only child, and I always say, if you're trying to get some clues or some insights into the personality, I do think, most only children that we know kind of grow up to be a little spoiled, a little self-indulged, the world is all about me kind of thing. And I think Sickles has probably got a little bit of that.
So he's a what do you call it? Spoiled
douchebag?
brat.
You call him a douchebag.
Well,
is what you call him.
okay, he's a douchebag, spoiled brat, douchebag. And he, what do you know much about his childhood, like what he was like, or?
There's a handful of stories that have kind of come down. He seems to have been rebellious.
Okay.
A little difficult.
What a shock.
Yeah, a little difficult to tame. So there's a story at one point where the parents had sent him away to school, and he got in trouble with the headmaster, because he couldn't be disciplined kind of thing, and they had to pull him out of the school. So that's kind of a common story that's passed down. It kind of tells us a little bit about what Dan Sickles, the schoolmate, might have been like.
So as he gets a little older, what does he get into? Does he what does he go into? What profession?
So at one point he considers printing, publishing, but ultimately goes into law. And, he is primarily, I think, self-taught in the law. I mean, obviously, it wasn't like going to law school today. You sit with somebody and you read his books and that sort of thing. But ultimately, Sickles became a lawyer in New York City. And that was, I think, his first real serious attempt at a profession.
And then did he know Ben Butler before?
Yeah, but it's the other Ben Butler, and that confuses people sometimes. So believe it or not, there were multiple Ben Butlers in the pre-Civil War era.
Sure.
But how many of them ended up inside of a bedpan?
Yeah, exactly. Not ironically, not Sickles' Ben Butler.
But this is Benjamin Franklin Butler, the lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And so you knew that. You already knew that.
Sometimes I know what I'm asking.
I can read in your glasses what you got on your screen. Yeah, exactly.
It's time to take these
the
off.
Wikipedia for Benjamin Franklin Butler. Let's see how quickly we can get back. That's all right. That's all right.
It's your job to know everything. I just know enough.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so go ahead. So he works with him, and then it runs for Congress, right?
Well, yeah, there's a couple. There's a couple steps in between.
Go ahead.
But you basically got it. He rises up through Tammany Hall, New York City politics, New York Assembly. For a while, he is serving with future President James Buchanan. Buchanan's the minister to England. Sickles is, kind of like his secretary. So there's a lot of steps in between, but I think basically New York City politics and Tammany Hall and everything that goes along with that.
So you bring up Tammany Hall.
Yeah.
For people that are not really versed in this, what exactly is Tammany Hall? Because and I'm tying it in because when people come here, they see the 42nd New York monument.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's got an Indian on top in front of a teepee. It's all wrong, but it's got that, and people think Indians fought here, and then you got to correct them in the Tammany Regiment. Okay,
Tammany.
What is it? What is Tammany Hall?
So Tammany Hall was basically a Democrat political lobby in New York City, and it was notorious for graft, kickbacks, corruption, things of that nature. So, many people have heard the name Boss Tweed as being one example. But the idea was, if you were a member of Tammany Hall, the Democrats, you basically controlled New York City with a lot of backroom deals.
And so he gets involved with them. Sounds like a fitting place for him.
Sure. Yeah.
And what are the highlights of his tenure with them? Anything?
Like I said, there's the New York State Assembly, New York Legal Counsel. There's always been one story that he's at a political rally and gets thrown down a flight of stairs, which, again, so you think of how crappy politics are today, right? Imagine you burst into a meeting, Dan Sickles is there, and you throw the guy down the stairs kind of thing. So definitely more physically violent. Today we're like, oh, so-and-so did an angry tweet.
Right,
and
right. It's the worst thing in
and we
the
get our
world.
feelings hurt about that.
yeah.
Dan Sickles, I mean, got in fights and got beat up over it, and probably kicked some ass over it.
I'm
too,
sure
I would
he
guess.
did.
I'm sure he did.
Which we know he really does the ultimate in a little bit, but before we get there, let's finish this with this here. So he do you know what it was about that the guy threw him down the stairs for?
No, just a rally. You know, I think
a rally.
yeah, probably somebody
Probably slept with his wife or
else.
something, or made a pass at her.
Well, should we go to the womanizing? Should we go
Let's
there?
get into that.
All right. So the other thing that's characteristic of Sickles is, he's a playboy, spends money. He's a womanizer. Right. I mean, the famous one is that he becomes entangled with a New York businesswoman who goes by the name of Fanny White, and Fanny White, right? So supposedly runs some high-end bordellos in New York City.
A businesswoman.
Exactly.
Yes.
Running the business and that sort of thing. And Sickles is her customer kind of thing. But they seem to become romantically entangled. And there's a lot of stories about, him exchanging her services for political favors. She's using some of her money to buy Sickles his bling and his wardrobe and stuff like that. So there's a lot of sort of back and forth.
But they're not married.
No, they're not.
Is he married at this point when he's with her?
Not yet. Not yet.
But so she will stay through marriages or in marriage at least.
Because what happens is, meanwhile, during all of this, Sickles has met Teresa Baggioli, who is basically the adopted daughter of a Sickles family friend. You like that? You should Baggioli, right? So Matt likes
you got to say it like that.
Baggioli. All right. So Teresa Baggioli. So they Sickles has met Teresa, who is about 16 years his junior.
Right. He's about 32 at this point. 30-ish.
Yeah. He's about 32 when they get married. They had met many years earlier.
Okay.
But anyways, so they get married when he's 32, she's 16. She's probably pregnant at that time.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, how do you figure this?
Well, there were accounts at the time that pretty much said that was the case.
That was an anticlimactic. I thought I had a good question there that was going to have this big bombshell answer. And
what were you thinking?
I don't know. Like, while I uncovered it in a library when I was doing my research.
No. I mean, there's newspaper accounts that talk about it. And, people whisper in memoirs, and
rumors.
And
yes.
stuff
Okay.
Like that. So that was not a good enough answer.
No. It's good. It's just I was expecting more. I'm sorry about that. But so he, as they say, knocked her up. And then
they do say that
they're going to have a shotgun wedding. You're going to have a shotgun wedding.
Yeah.
Okay. And they get married.
Mm-hmm. They get married.
And then where do they live?
So they get married. Initially they're still in New York City, and he is over in England working with Buchanan. I told you he's James Buchanan's secretary for about a year in New York City. We're in the early mid 1850s at this point. So at one point while he's in England, Teresa's home with what would eventually be their daughter, Laura.
Okay.
Sickles probably at least one point, has Fanny White come over to England, either with him or they come over separately. I have a friend who's done it's kind of interesting. He's done a lot of research on what ship they were on and when they came over and all that. And I know she's going to listen and say, "No, that's not what happened." But the point being, there's always been stories that Sickles introduced Fanny to Queen Victoria. To big scandal and
he snubbed her, didn't he, or something? At some. Thing.
Yeah. There's this July 4th shindig where basically Sickles July 4th he refuses to rise and give her a toast, sort of thing.
But he's over in England.
Yeah,
and they're celebrating the 4th of July.
Well,
like American.
Exactly. He's with the American legation over there, and what are you going to do? Right?
And so he just snubbed the Queen.
Yeah.
What a jerk.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
And then so he
trying to drum up some fake drama here. Yeah,
exactly.
We gotta boost our youth.
Yeah, we got to boost our numbers. So I'm trying to get us into a fist fight.
Yeah,
over the table. No, so
because we do have this intense rivalry.
Well, we hate each other, right? We do this purely for ratings.
Yeah.
No, so he snubs the Queen, and then this white what was Fanny White?
Yeah.
She's a prostitute, so he brings a prostitute over there,
or at least a madam. At least a madam.
She had to start somewhere.
Exactly,
right?
You got to work your way up.
Exactly.
Right?
So she was once a prostitute,
right?
And brings her over there. Do they know? Does he I'm assuming he dresses her up and makes her look like a proper lady and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. And she probably she was pretty successful. Yeah. So he introduces her to the Queen. A fake name.
It was a rival's name, wasn't it?
Yeah, supposedly introduces her as Miss Bennett. And, James Gordon Bennett was one of Sickles' rivals with one of the big New York newspapers. So,
The guy. Okay.
That guy.
I mean, you see, this is the thing. I have a love-hate with Sickles.
Right.
Like, some of these things I'm like...
Because you kind of started off with hate. Are we we're 10 minutes in? Or
Well,
are you
I'm playing...
coming back a little bit?
No, Jim. No.
Yeah.
I'm playing the hate card.
Yeah.
But in reality, I get a kick out of the guy. Like,
right.
I find him humorous. But I would not want to be his friend. I wouldn't trust him.
Well, you wouldn't trust. But how many of your own friends do you trust?
None.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. See here, Eric, the producer, exactly. So.
No. But okay. So moving on. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Where the hell?
I don't know. You're the one that knows stuff.
So he introduces Fanny to the Queen. He's married at this time. Eventually, though, he comes back to New York, and one thing leads to another, and he runs for Congress. And we're going to get him to Congress.
Okay. So now we get to Congress.
Yeah.
So he runs for Congress. I'm assuming from the state of New York,
Democrat,
and wins.
Oh yeah.
Okay, he wins, and then at this point in his early pre-war congressional days, any achievements of note, and then dirt.
Yeah. I mean, as far as achievements of note, he's one of the original driving forces in the establishment of Central Park. Now, that's more from a political kind of view. He supported the legislation, and things of that nature.
Right.
He later called himself the father of Central Park, but he really wasn't. But he was part of that. I mean, that's a noteworthy accomplishment. Other than that, I think, just sort of basic Tammany Hall, New York kind of stuff. Somebody said to me one time, well, as a lawyer, what was his one-loss record? I'm like, how the hell should I know? It's just sort of, but somewhere, I think with Tammany Hall backing him up, he is getting some notoriety as a guy who, might be going places.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then during, 1856 that he runs and is elected, right?
Yeah.
And then a few years later, now when does he marry Teresa?
So,
52. He's already married.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So she then begins this affair with a fellow named Philip Barton Key.
Yeah.
For those of you who are totally new to this, he's the son of Francis Scott Key.
After they've gotten to Washington.
Yeah. And Francis Scott Key is dead at this point.
Yeah, we've established that. And he's still dead.
He's still dead.
Yeah.
There's no bringing him back.
He's dead to this day.
Exactly.
Okay. So he...
Teresa's having an affair.
That's it. I wanted to call her Fanny. That's what.
Yeah,
so
with Philip
what's her,
Barton Key.
And so later, so I'm going to just jump to the end and then jump back.
All right.
Okay, so after the murder, there's going to be a murder here, folks. Okay. After the murder, the newspapers get a hold of her confession to him or something like that and print it.
Yeah.
And it has the sordid details of their affair, right?
Yes, all the illicit
graphic.
We had connection. I did what a wicked woman should do. All that stuff.
Ooh, okay, scandalous.
On the couch.
On the couch.
And the couch.
Oh my God!
Yeah, ridden in Mr. Sickles' carriage, all that stuff. Yeah,
I bet someone.
Exactly.
I bet someone was ridden in the carriage.
Exactly.
All right, come on, guys. That was cheap. All right, so this is what was going on with Philip.
Yeah,
and Sickles catches wind of this. How?
So it's going on for a while. One night, Sickles receives an anonymous letter from somebody who basically says, "Hey, just thought you'd want to know because Sickles and Key were friends. We didn't touch on that, but they were friends. But hey, just want to let you know your friend Philip Barton Key has more use of your wife than you have, kind of thing. Yeah,
that's the way he put it.
Yeah. And so to that extent, Sickles goes, can't believe it. He's got this anonymous letter, does a little digging, a little investigating. Turns out that, Teresa and Key are doing it.
On the couch and in the carriage.
And they'd rented a house down the street a couple blocks away. They rented a little love shack.
Wow.
Key would, light the fire and, hang a little thing out the window for Teresa to come and play. So
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty. The thing is,
So she was into this.
oh yeah.
Yeah,
I
this
mean, I don't know
wasn't-
what she was into.
No.
yeah,
But
she
what
was
I'm
into
saying
that.
is
Yeah.
she's not like some kind of victim here of some
invested.
predator. What, Eric?
She's invested here.
She's invested. She's She's
Thank
invested.
you. Yes, she's invested.
Probably.
Because they have a routine. They have a plan. They have signals.
Yeah, I mean, Key was a ladies' man on his own, on his own merits. Key was a ladies' man. He once allegedly said, all he needed was like 24 hours with any woman to get her to do whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
The women of Washington all loved Key. So I mean, he's a ladies' man. Sickles, continues to have his own affairs after he gets married, after he's in Congress. And yeah, she's kind of like, she's the wife of a congressman. She's got a lot of social obligations. She's got to go to parties and dinners and all that stuff. So she's going to bump into Philip Barton Key at these dinners. And one thing led to another.
All right. And so Sickles finds out.
Yep.
And somebody says, hey, someone's getting more use out of your wife than you are. And how long after he hears that message does he go out and
Couple
do it?
days.
Couple days.
Yeah, so he spends a couple days kind of investigating. That Saturday, he gets the confession out of Teresa, and the following day is Sunday, and it's a beautiful spring day in Washington, D.C. Sickles looks out his window. He sees Key out in front of the house. Key's twirling his handkerchief for Teresa to come out and play.
Oh.
Sickles grabs a couple guns, confronts him, and it's on.
So he gets the confession from her first.
Yeah.
And actually has it written down. Like, how does... So... What does he have, like a stenographer there? And
No, there was a thing back then called pencil and paper, and he puts the paper. So they were fighting. They were fighting that night at dinner, and they go upstairs. He calls a couple household servants in, I think, to witness it. So I think and he kind of says, okay, start writing, woman. And
sure,
she goes from
yeah.
there,
So she wrote out her own confession.
Yeah. As far as we know, yeah.
Wow. And then he goes and kills Key. So now, what are the circumstances of the murder? Murder.
Well, how do you mean circumstances?
Well, I mean, he just walks up to him when he's shaking his handkerchief and just pops him in the belly, or does he have some words?
No, well, so Sickles has got a friend with him, a guy from New York by the name of Sam Butterworth. Now, for Gettysburg aficionados, that's Butterworth, not Dan Butterfield. My wife says a lot of times I'll slip and say Butterfield. If I screw up, it's Butterworth.
Sure.
But anyways, Butterworth is here from New York. Butterworth kind of comes out first, kind of, I think, distracts Key a little bit. Hey, Key, Butterworth, how you doing? Sickles does a flanking maneuver. This is all at Lafayette Square in front of the White House. Sickles goes around the other end of Lafayette Square, basically says, Key, you scoundrel, you've dishonored my house. You must die. And so what he does is there's a little bit of a wrestling match first.
Okay.
Key knocks one of the guns out of Sickles' hands. I always say, with like cat-like reflexes, Sickles responds.
Sure.
Key's got opera glasses. He throws the opera glasses at Sickles.
What a silly nanny.
But Sickles has got a couple of guns on him, so pulls them out and fires several shots into Mr. Key.
And dead. Right there.
Not immediately,
Oh.
but they take Key to a clubhouse nearby, a house where he had been staying, a boarding house, and they put him on. Ironically, they put Key on the floor of like the front room of the house, and people like gawkers are coming in and like looking at like that, and he dies like laying on the floor while these people are kind of looking at him.
What a way to go.
Yeah. But folks, let that be a lesson. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Don't dally with married women.
Right.
Yeah,
And
don't go
your
riding in
your best friend's
carriages
wife.
with
In the carriage.
Dan Sickles'
Yep.
wife.
That's right. So.
All right. So he then, because I'm sure he's a congressman and everything, they just turn a blind eye, like with Gary Condit, right? Like,
Not exactly.
Oh, no.
So,
Okay.
all right. So Sickles.
What happens?
Yeah. So Sickles turns himself in. He gets arrested. He gets incarcerated. And, Washington, New York, really the whole country is talking about this case.
This is a big story.
It is coast to coast. I mean, I've always referred to it as like the OJ trial in our era. I mean, it is coast to coast coverage. I mean, even, we found accounts of the trial here in Gettysburg, the Gettysburg Compiler, and some of the local papers. I always say, imagine like Tilly Pierce, like fainting when she reads all the scandalous details. Or if Tim is watching,
wasn't she
what
there
if Jenny
too?
Wade?
Didn't she see it?
Yeah,
She saw everything else.
She has an account of it.
Sorry.
She's like 9 years old, but she has an account of
exactly.
Sickles killing Key.
So, but anyways, it's coast to coast coverage. Sickles basically assembles this legal dream team.
Okay.
And, they go to work on getting him off. Just as kind of a quick side note, because it's kind of a common misconception. People always say Edwin Stanton, future Secretary of War Edwin Stanton.
Defended him.
Yeah, and that's true. Stanton is on the dream team, but he's a member of the team. He's not the lead attorney. And I only say that because, again, what you see a lot is people say, oh, Edwin Stanton got Sickles off. Stanton was a member of the team. Guy from New York by the name of James Brady, who was supposed to be a brilliant lawyer, was the one I think who really got it done.
Brady was Johnny Cochran.
Yeah.
And Stanton was Robert Kardashian.
Yeah, maybe even a little bit of the Shapiro kind of thing.
Okay. But
I definitely think Brady was probably the Johnny Cochran of the team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did he have any clever rhymes to get him off?
That's
no. If the pistol don't fit.
If you ride in the carriage, you must.
If you ride in the carriage, you have voided your marriage.
There you go.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's some purists out there that don't like us having fun, so I apologize.
We get that on our show too.
Yeah.
Do you guys get those comments?
One guy said, Matt, stop interrupting.
Basically.
Yeah, basically he says stop interrupting the guests.
I like that.
Let the smart people and let the smart people talk.
Oh, I like that guy. Remember that guy. But no, we get that on our show too.
Yeah.
Stop clowning around.
Right.
Get to the serious history. Yeah, we get that too. Yeah.
Because they're sitting there with I gotta cut that out.
Jesus.
Get Sickles off.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
Enough with that. I had to do it. All right, so now we're back.
Well, after that unintended break, you're wondering what that's all about.
I just had to dump myself for the very first time.
Right.
Okay, so the trial, Stanton on the team doesn't directly, he's not the leader of the team and everything like that. How does the trial go? How long does it last for?
Trial lasts for, I forget, it's like 20-something days, so it goes maybe 3 weeks or so. Public opinion, very much in Sickles' favor. I mean, very much. And I know one of the questions here is like, well, how could Sickles get command of troops when he had admitted to being temporarily insane? He didn't. He didn't plead not guilty by reason of insanity. They pleaded not guilty. In their view of the time, you got to remember this is the 1850s, right? In the era of the time, the idea was Key had sort of broken the unwritten law. He had
code.
Yeah, bro code. He had violated his friend's marriage, and the Dream Team and Sickles played to the jury and the newspapers, and ultimately that's what got Sickles off. There isn't a lot of talk about he was temporarily insane, and even though that's what the trial is today remembered for.
Yeah. Now wait. So no, you're not saying that he didn't claim temporary insanity.
What I'm saying is what they primarily used for the defense was essentially a self-defense argument, and this unwritten rule. Part of the defense basically came down to this idea of Sickles was so overcome by the idea of Key doing his wife that his mind temporarily became diseased and he lost control of his passions. And when the judge gives the instructions to the jury, the judge does say to the jury, if you have any doubt about that, what mental condition Sickles was in, then you should acquit him. So that's how it worked but it wasn't like a modern, John Hinckley, Lorena Bobbitt kind of, not guilty by reason of insanity. It wasn't like that.
Yeah, it wasn't stated as
right.
not guilty by reason of insanity.
And I'll tell you, even at the time, I've read a lot of newspapers and that on it. Even the media coverage at the time wasn't talking about that at all.
Interesting.
What they were talking about was, you screw around with a married woman, and you're going to meet your doom. And that's what they were talking about.
When does that whole temporary insanity thing really become like a
thing?
Popular? But
yeah. So I always kind of clarify this and say I'm not a law expert. I'm a historian, right? I'm a Sickles nut, as Matt said at the beginning. I'm not. But what happens is this sort of crime of passion, and you see other instances of it when you go through newspapers in the 1800s, or that I don't even think anymore that Sickles. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Fair enough.
I just want, but
hey, that guy's going to comment about you interrupting.
That was Eric, the producer. Just remember. All right.
Remember that in the YouTube.
So,
comments.
anyways, my point being, I don't even think Sickles was the first crime of passion of that type. It's just the one that gets attention for that.
Sure.
But then what morphs over the late 1800s into what we call temporary insanity today? Yeah. You can Wikipedia it or something, but I want to say that starts to become popular like in the 1940s, if I'm remembering it correctly. And today I don't know how much it's even used today. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer.
When does Sickles really become known for it, though?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know when the Sickles like a lot of my friends who are lawyers that will Veronica. This would be a good one for Veronica, right? Like you read these law journals, and the law journals say first used by Congressman Dan Sickles, and I don't know when that really when the trial really changed from one to the other. But I would guess, if I had to guess, I would guess 1900s. Okay, that would be my guess.
So after. So way after all this.
Yeah.
So here's what's interesting is I looked it up on law.cornell.edu, and I don't know, it's got a bunch of paragraphs with words and stuff, but I skipped to the bottom of it. It says, see also People versus William Freeman in 1847.
Right.
It was the first case in the United States where a defendant used an insanity defense. The case was heard and decided by the New York Supreme Court. So they're saying this is the first case, but of course Sickles is the first high-profile case.
Yeah, and remember, insanity versus temporary insanity. What is today considered temporary insanity.
True. Okay.
Yeah, but I think what you just said is right. I think even looking at it from what we would call a temporary insanity perspective, I think today that's more Sickles is the first high-profile one.
Okay.
And I think as people go more into digital newspapers and stuff like that, I think people are going to find other examples that didn't get the play that a Sickles trial did.
Oh, that's a good point.
But it's how it's remembered.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, so he is acquitted.
Yes.
And now what was interesting is that you said that popular opinion was on his side.
Right.
And that makes sense, right? Because I mean, especially as you point out, the way people were back then and the way people thought, of things. Yeah, you violate a man's home, the sanctity of his marriage, and you get what's coming to you.
You're bringing the Bible into it. I mean, all this stuff.
Yeah.
10 Commandments are being broken. I forget what adultery's number.
Adultery is one of those.
Something.
I don't know.
Number 9 or bottom of the list, but it's still on the list.
Yep.
Yeah.
On that's okay. So. What happens for him after this? Is he still in Congress afterwards?
He is. So he's still in Congress. So what happens is that summer, Dan and Teresa reconcile. They get back to he takes her back. All right, and that gets into it gets into the newspapers. It's public. Everybody knows it. He takes her back, and that's when public opinion turns against him. Yeah,
because she should just be thrown out in the streets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people are kind of like, well, wait a minute, look at all this. We put the dream team together, man, for you, and look at all this trouble we went to get him off. And what does he do? He takes her back.
Yeah.
And so that really kind of turned opinion against him. So that when his last term in Congress ends, I forget what date. I think early '61. But when his last last term in Congress ends, he doesn't run for re-election.
Okay.
So, there's a great account of, Mary Chestnut. She sees him sitting alone in Congress, and, basically says to her friend, who is that? And the friend's like, oh, that's Dan Sickles. Stay away. Don't talk about him. We don't talk about this unsavory subject kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of the beginning of public opinion now looking at Sickles as a seedy character rather than, what had been a potentially up-and-coming, politician.
Yeah. Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
So then when the tempers are starting to flare leading into the war,
Yeah.
what is his stance, like politically? What is he's a Democrat.
Yes.
What kind of Democrat is he?
Well, that's a good question. So he's still in Congress for some of the flaring tempers, before the war starts. And initially, at one point he seems to give a speech to the effect of, you know what, New York will secede too. And I don't. He doesn't seem to be pro-slavery. In fact, later on, he seems to do some things that will suggest that he's actually anti-slavery, which is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
right, folks.
we agree that is a good thing.
We would agree, but anyways, he initially gives a speech that basically says, "Hey, New York can secede." Eventually, he comes around to really being a strong unionist. And when, the South secedes, as you all know, primarily led by Southern Democrats, in a lot of ways he feels like the Southern Democratic leaders have really kind of betrayed the party and betrayed the country. So even though he's a Democrat, I think he really is committed to the war effort. And look, folks, if you want to say something nice about the guy, say that. He's committed to the war effort.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, that is one nice thing to say.
It is. We'll get to more
He's
nice
loyal.
things. Central Park. Don't you guys like Central
it's
Park?
beautiful.
Who doesn't like parks?
Yeah.
Okay, that's two things.
Gorgeous. Okay, two things. All right. So he believes in preserving the Union. So then when the war before we get to the actual outbreak of the war, when the war starts, though, he's not brand spanking new to wearing a military uniform, but he's not a military guy.
Yeah.
He's not trained.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't cover that. But during the 50s, the 1850s, he was apparently spent some time in New York militia. Mm-hmm. and a lot of prominent guys back then did that. You get to wear the uniform, right. You march in a parade, you promise the ladies that if the British invade the town again, you're going to defend them, kind of thing.
Right.
It's interesting, though, if you ever look at James Buchanan's correspondence, which has been published, even during the mid-1850s when Sickles was working for Buchanan, Buchanan often refers to him as Colonel Sickles. Mm-hmm. Colonel Sickles. Mm-hmm. So I think there was this sort of bling from the militia. So no, he never went to West Point, no formal military training, which every Gettysburg enthusiast knows, but there was sort of this militia background that, again, a lot of these guys had.
Okay. So war breaks out.
Yeah.
He's in that militia still. Does that translate into his service with
No. So a couple things I think happen. And again, some of it you got to kind of put your Sickles BS filter on because some of this is stories he tells later.
Yeah.
But what he says is basically him and a friend raised troops in New York. He's practicing law as an attorney in New York back in New York when the war breaks out. Him and a friend raised troops. Then it's kind of funny because he seems to stiff his friend with the bills for recruiting and feeding and housing. I forget, it's like $180,000.
Right.
But in 1860s is a lot of money. But anyways, he stiffs the friend. But he says initially all he wanted to do was serve as a private. It seems kind of preposterous.
Sure.
Private Sickles.
Yeah.
But they make him a colonel of one of the regiments. That these regiments will eventually become what we know as the Excelsior Brigade. And fights as the Excelsior Brigade through Gettysburg. So he starts off as a colonel of one of the regiments. Now this is again where you got to kind of think, okay, what's real and what isn't. He says at this time he comes to Lincoln's attention. And Lincoln's kind of like, well, I like you fighting Democrat. Kind of thing, and kind of thing, and so he's now the Lincolns are kind of at least aware of him. They sort of like him. They need Democrats, and I know there was a question to this effect, but they need Democrats to support this unpopular war effort. And pretty quickly, he's going to go at least from colonel to brigadier general.
And he commands the Excelsior Brigade at that point, right?
Yeah, eventually he'll get brigade. Well, eventually he'll get a brigade. And through I think it's 7 days or so. Before then, afterwards he'll start. Eventually, after that, moving up to division and beyond.
And then as the war breaks out, why don't we do this? As the war goes on, just give us his service record, because this isn't really about Sickles at Gettysburg. It's about his whole life, so we want to get to his post-war stuff. So we're not going to hang out at Gettysburg too long.
Oh, okay.
But go ahead. Give us, so he's a brigadier general. He's got the Excelsior Brigade. Work your way up.
Yeah, so first of all, he has difficulty getting nominated, confirmed as a general. And the story has always been that, Lincoln, again, helps push him through to getting the general promotion. And, again, a lot of the guys who got to confirm this in the Senate and that, they're like, well, wait a minute, Sickles? That guy? And he's a Democrat, so there's a lot of political opposition to seeing him get pushed through. And, allegedly Lincoln helps, give him the push to become, to move up to brigadier and then eventually major general.
Right.
But the thing I always say with Sickles, his war record, he starts out, I think, like during the 7 days and things of that nature, I think he would have been competent as a brigade commander, and potentially over time could have moved up to division and corps and all of that stuff. But in 1862, I think when he sort of falls under Joe Hooker's orbit, I think what happens is he gets promoted too fast. He gets promoted to division, and then he's eventually a corps commander. And the thing is, the big battles of 62 that we think about, Second Manassas, Antietam, Fredericksburg, the first two, Antietam and Second Manassas, in the fall of 62, he's home in New York on leave and doing some recruiting duty. So he doesn't, as the battles are getting bigger and more complicated, he's away from
getting experience.
Yeah, he's not getting the experience, and he's away from the Army. Now he comes back to Fredericksburg, December of 1862, and he's a division commander in the 3rd Corps by that point. But then at Fredericksburg, his division is mostly held in reserve.
Right.
So he's there, but he doesn't get a lot of experience again.
Right.
I think that's the military shortcoming of Dan Sickles. It's not about, he never went to West Point. A lot of guys in the Civil War didn't go to West Point. No. And frankly, a lot of guys who did go to West Point didn't make sucked, and they didn't make well, thank you. I'm glad you said that. They didn't make a whole lot out of that. So I don't, I can kind of take it or leave it with the West Point education. But I think that 1862 period where the battles are getting big and he isn't getting the experience, but he's still getting promoted, I think that's the big missed opportunity for him.
So he's getting more power, more troops,
more responsibility,
and no experience.
Yeah, and hold that thought.
Go ahead. Glug, 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 glug. Okay, there we go.
Brought to you by Poland Spring. But the other thing, too, is we talked about the responsibility of that independence, right? Because the higher you get into the food chain, and especially as you get to Corps Command, there's some expectation that you're going to operate independently, which I think is something that hurts them at Gettysburg, looking at foreshadowing ahead.
Well, okay, so his big thing, I know we have questions that touch on these, so let's get into a little bit more of it now, or at least touch on it now, and then we can get into it during the questions.
So basically we'll do it again? How this works?
Do it in depth during the question. But people want to know about Chancellorsville as it relates to Gettysburg.
There were a number of Chancellorsville questions. Not that I looked at the questions, but I think I heard
through osmosis you figured that out.
Yeah, Chancellorsville I think is an interesting one. So he is now commanding the 3rd Corps. His buddy, Joe Hooker, is commanding the Army of the Potomac. So Sickles has a very close relationship with headquarters at Chancellorsville, much closer than he's going to have at Gettysburg. And I think that makes a difference because, he can go back and forth to headquarters when he isn't sure about an order or whatever. He can get advice and that sort of thing. But he's commanding the 3rd Corps. And I touched on this a lot in the Sickles at Gettysburg book. Even though the book is at Gettysburg, I covered a lot of other stuff. But I touched on Chancellorsville a lot. May 2nd at Chancellorsville, Sickles discovers Stonewall Jackson's flank march. I mean, Sickles in the 3rd Corps. The 3rd Corps sees Jackson's flank march in progress, and they kind of report it up to the chain so that it gets interpreted by Hooker as a retreat. You know,
Right.
yeah. So that's an important moment. Kind of shows maybe
not intentionally.
Yeah, no, not
It's just
intentionally.
the way they did
Right.
it.
Right.
When they have to get in shape really fast.
What the hell is that? Who was that?
I thought that was Eric cueing us to be like move on to the next topic. Yeah, right,
like when they play the music at the Grammys or something when you're giving a speech too long.
Right.
What was that?
That was your Google.
My Google.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. What was it saying?
I don't know. It was
So if you're
YouTube.
an actor that you want to lose weight fast, I don't.
Is Bo doing weight loss ads now? I don't even know, Bo. I'm not. Well, you guys are talking about this. I'm going to check my messages. All right.
Okay, so go ahead.
Where
I'm
the hell
sorry.
were we?
I'm sorry for that interruption.
Yeah, Chancellorsville.
Chancellorsville. So Chancellorsville, we were saying that he didn't intentionally report it so that Hooker would. I just wanted to clarify that the way you said it. I just want to make sure it was clear that he didn't intentionally report it so that Hooker would think that it was a retreat.
I mean, do we think so little of Sickles that we think he would intentionally report the wrong thing?
Yes.
Well, then we need to change that perception. But he gets it wrong. He says to Hooker, I think it's a retreat. So he gets it wrong.
Right.
Not intentionally, folks.
Right.
But he gets it wrong, which, doesn't excuse Howard and the 11th Corps or Hooker from the whole debacle that happens later when Jackson outflanks the entire army. But it does contribute to it. And so, if I'm sort of taking a scorecard here, I'd go, well, okay, he kind of gets that wrong. He orders, or he proposes and ultimately orders a midnight attack in the wilderness on the night of May 2nd. That's a fiasco. So, I mean, who would do nighttime missions in the wilderness?
Right, of all places.
So,
too.
again, aggressive but questionable judgment. And then the one that everybody, though, always kind of knows when they think of Chancellorsville, because it may or may not have a direct tie into Gettysburg, is the whole Hazel Grove thing on May 3rd. Right? So on May 3rd, Sickles' Corps are basically in an advanced position known as Hazel Grove. It is kind of a broad, flat elevation that is described as being good for artillery, and Hooker wants to pull Sickles back. So he orders the 3rd Corps out of Hazel Grove, back into the main line, and Confederates come in behind Sickles and basically use the artillery to pound the Union Army out of their position. So there's kind of three big things he's involved with at Chancellorsville. None of them really end well for the Union Army, and of course many people to this day debate whether the Hazel Grove thing leads to the Peach Orchard at Gettysburg.
Yeah, and then that makes sense. It's only 2 months prior to Gettysburg, and it was kind of... Now, was he against withdrawing when he was ordered to withdraw?
I don't know. I don't recall if he had a strong position pro or con. I think his buddy Hooker orders him back, so he goes back.
Okay.
And which again is ironic though, because we think of Sickles as he only disobeys orders,
Right.
But he doesn't.
No.
He does what he's told.
He couldn't have made it, even without combat experience, he couldn't have made it this long if he was disobeying everything.
Yeah, you would hope, right? Yeah, you would hope, right?
Right, that's a good point.
Right.
All right, and then at Gettysburg, he's most famous for sacrificing the 3rd Corps out at the Peach Orchard and along that line there.
Yeah. Sacrificing. Words matter, Matt.
I know they do.
Words matter.
I know they do. All right, so go ahead. But what really happens with him at Gettysburg?
You know what? Let's just skip by Gettysburg. Who knows? Right? No.
But what do you see? What would you say overall? We'll get into the nitty gritty later. But overall, was he acting properly by doing what he did, by going out to that line?
Right. And the answer to that question is no, he wasn't.
All right, that's all I wanted to hear.
All right. Do you want more?
Yeah, give me more, but I wanted to hear you say no.
Cut the mic there. No.
Thank you. Good night, ladies and
that's the thing, too. I mean, in some quarters, and I'm going to make a personal comment for a minute. In some quarters, you write a book about Sickles, you get portrayed as a Sickles guy.
Right.
And, really, what the Sickles at Gettysburg book was heralded for, Matt. Was basically how unbiased it was. And I'm hard on Sickles when I think I need to be hard on Sickles. Yeah. But answer your question, look, the orders from Meade are clearly what they are. And Meade describes the orders as, extend Hancock's left, replace the 12th Corps, occupy that hill, plainly visible if practical. And that's basically how Meade describes the orders. Now, books have come out recently that have made it a little bit stronger than that, and that's fine, but that's how Meade described the orders, and Sickles doesn't do that.
Right.
So, the short answer to your question is no, he's not acting properly. To me, though, the why do you do stuff like that was always more interesting than the what, right? Because, we could do Sickles moves out to the peach orchard, suffers heavy casualties, see you guys, end of the show.
Right.
You could do that if that's the why. The why is harder to figure out because at the end of the day, you don't know what these people are thinking, and that's where Sickles draws the most heat. Did he willfully disobey orders? Did he want to destroy the army? Was he an idiot? All that stuff is, where people go.
I've never heard somebody ask if he was an idiot.
I've never heard people ask if he's an idiot. I've heard people say, yeah.
Oh, no, I wouldn't call him an idiot.
Nobody would ever ask, is he an idiot? He was an idiot.
I don't think you could have that life and be an idiot.
Exactly. So you have read the book.
I know enough to know.
But you're right.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. Think about. Think
read
about
the Wikipedia.
Exactly. Think about the resume. Right. Attorney, politician, statesman, soldier. A friend of multiple presidential administrations. On and on and on. Anybody listening to this show, including you or I, would kill to have that resume. So
but to be honest, though,
he's an idiot.
Honestly, though, like every idiot I've ever known is now a lawyer, politician. Like they're all, very successful.
Well, I always say he's a New Yorker, he's a politician, and he's an attorney, right? He's three things we all hate. Rolled up into one guy, but it doesn't mean he's an idiot, right?
Yeah. It is true. He's like all the things that most people despise, and but that's why he's fascinating. All right, so we'll get more into Gettysburg later, but he loses his leg here.
Yeah.
And he heads right back down to Washington. Mm-hmm. And is he one of the first people from the field that Lincoln, or is he the first?
He might be the first. We believe he's the first.
That Lincoln talks to.
Yeah, in person, I believe he's the first.
While the battle is still going on.
Well, by now it's July 4th, 5th, 6th, kind of thing. So the campaign is still going on. Right. And, at this point, Lincoln is like, what is Meade going to do with Lee's army kind of thing. But, yeah, Lincoln wants to talk to anybody who knows what's going on at Gettysburg, and here's his old friend Dan Sickles, back in Washington recuperating.
And this is interesting because Sickles, Democrat, Meade, probably Democrat or a Democrat. Do we know what he was?
Yeah, Democrat. And again, if any Meade enthusiasts are out there, and I got that wrong, but
but I think I read somewhere that he was a Democrat.
The whole thing where he's in Detroit and all that stuff that the Meade people get upset about. Yeah.
Well, okay, but so my point is that he's talking with Lincoln.
Yep.
And basically stabbing Meade in the back. Like he's
or is he?
Well, okay, is he?
Well, look, what do we know? All we really know is people who were there said Sickles got his side of the story well into Meade's head.
Right.
That's what we know. That's what we know. This is a couple days after the Battle of Gettysburg. Sickles is in great pain. He's just lost a leg. He may not survive. I don't know, if you really look at it objectively, how much time has he had to quote-unquote coordinate a hit job on Meade at this point.
Right.
But what I do think he probably tells Lincoln is that, look, I moved forward. I wasn't getting the attention I thought I needed from headquarters. I thought this would be a position to bring on the fight. Maybe he throws in there, and that Meade, he didn't really even want to fight anyways, kind of things. So all of that is probable, but we don't know. We don't know what he told Lincoln. All we know is, quote unquote, he got his side of the story into the president's head.
Okay. When he recuperates, is he out of the Army? Is he stay in the Army?
Yeah, so he stays in the Army. He is very much interested in returning to the field. So by October, think of Dan Sickles. The guy loses his leg in July. By October, he's ready to come back. Mike, how long is it taking you to recover from a hamstring pull? I'm not putting you on the spot, but you know what I'm saying? I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but you know what I'm saying. So by October, he wants to come back to the Army, and he goes down to Virginia where the Army is. He meets up with Meade, and Meade says, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
You really don't look like you're in condition for this. Go back home. And, I think that's when Sickles starts stabbing Meade in the back.
Like in the fall.
In the fall.
Okay.
Because now you've got this thing. He wants to come back to the Army. Meade isn't going to let him back to the Army. Now you've got a motive. And I think that's probably when the hit job starts.
And isn't he kind of displeased with Grant later on for not allowing him to get back into the field? Grant, not Meade.
Well, not real. I mean, what happens is going ahead, obviously.
Yeah, we're jumping around.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, but Meade doesn't let him back into the Army of the Potomac.
Okay.
And so then what he's doing is he's hanging around Washington for a little while, pestering Lincoln for an assignment. Hey, I'm doing good. I got my crutches. I got an artificial leg. I want to be of use. You could send me out to the Western Theater. I want to do something. And Lincoln kind of bats it back and forth. And you see some correspondence. Well, maybe I'll send you here. Maybe I'll send you to Arkansas. I'll send you here. I'll send you there, kind of thing. But eventually, what they do is they send Sickles to like a diplomatic assignment in Central America, and that's where Sickles is when Lincoln is assassinated and the war is over. So yeah, he's still on the muster roll in the Army, but he wants to get back to a field command, and he never gets that.
When he returns from South America. Now the war's over at this point, right? What does he do? Is he part of Reconstruction at all as a military guy, or is he just in?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. He does end up doing Reconstruction in South Carolina, and he ends up commanding one of the military districts.
Oh, okay.
So again, right? Sickles is an idiot, or is he? Well, we're going to give one of the districts, we're giving these districts to guys like Hancock and Sickles.
Right. The superb and an idiot.
Right.
No.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
He can't be an idiot. He can't be. That one I will not entertain.
Well, good. You won't entertain that.
No,
They will not entertain that on Addressing Gettysburg.
It can't.
I like that.
It's impossible for him to be an idiot, to have achieved all the things that he's achieved. Now, scumbag, scumbags can also achieve certain things, but not all.
Yeah, Casey,
not all.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding, folks. Yeah.
We'll be cutting that out.
Oops, delete button on that one. Oh, Hessler's mic got cut off.
What's that, Jim? You're not coming in clear.
Yeah, that's right. But you're right. Character, scumbag, all that stuff. That is a separate equation.
Yeah, but his intelligence was up there.
Yeah.
Right. You got to be smart to be that way.
The other thing, because we haven't touched on it, I would just say Sickles is one of those guys, and we all know people like this. Things that start off well, he usually starts off well, and then it ends badly, kind of thing. And I got friends like that, and you probably do too.
Yeah, I'm like that.
But the thing is, eventually he runs afoul of the administration. When he's in South Carolina, he runs afoul of Washington and all of that. And eventually they kind of boot him out of the Carolinas. So, but it's a good example, and it happens in other examples in life. He starts well, kind of ends badly, but that's what he's doing during Reconstruction.
And then what does he do? Where does he go when that's all over?
Yeah, so he putters around a little bit. I mean, ultimately in the 1870s, he ends up being a minister to Spain. And
is Teresa still with him? Is she alive at this point?
No. We didn't cover that. Teresa died in 1867 of tuberculosis. Oh. So she got sick and died.
Poor girl.
And Sickles is single again.
Yeah.
So,
he's
on the market.
Yep. It's hot
he's
to
on
trot.
the market when he heads to Europe, So, but that's where he's in the 70s.
Well, he's more than on the market when he heads to Europe, because what does he do when he's in Spain?
Well, yeah.
I mean, there's on the market, and then there's getting the Queen of Spain.
Well, that's true. And so that's another.
I'm on the market, but I'm not getting.
You're not getting.
No, I'm not getting the Queen of Spain.
So she's not really the Queen of Spain at that point. She's sort of deposed. If I remember right, she's had some feud with her brother.
I'm not even getting deposed. Queens,
yeah, so she's in France, so he's kind of getting some of that. But there's another report too that while he's in Spain, and remember he's a diplomat over there, but there's a report too that he gets accused of running a prostitution ring over
in
there.
Spain?
Yeah.
As a diplomat?
Yeah.
Wow, the balls on on this guy.
Yeah, there's an accusation. Folks, it's just an accusation.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Thank God.
Innocent until proven guilty,
Yeah,
right? So,
I guess so.
You know, kind of thing. But there's accusations of him, you know, continuing his quote unquote shocking behavior over there.
Okay.
And you know, ultimately he leaves Spain because he's trying to convince us to go to war with them over the Virginius affair. There was a ship that had gotten captured and all of that stuff. But again, he runs afoul of Washington again, and you know, leaves Spain.
But he's a visionary, a man ahead of his time here, because he wants to go to war with Spain over a boat.
Exactly.
And they're like, no, maybe someday, but not now, Dan.
Dan Sickles, visionary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have Gettysburg to thank, or we have him to thank for Gettysburg, the way it is.
So many things to thank Dan Sickles
Okay.
for.
I'm liking this. Not an idiot, visionary, lawyer, scoundrel, manipulator, whatever. Okay. But that whole Virginius affair, you know, when that's done, what is he doing? What is he doing in relation to Gettysburg? When does he? Because I mean, you know, he's very instrumental in this place being what it is.
Yeah.
And so, how? Yeah.
So he comes back stateside in the late 1870s, I think 1878 or so. But he comes back really at a perfect time. You're right, because what's going on here at Gettysburg? The GAR is kind of getting involved with the veterans taking a more active part in the battlefield in the late
memorials
1870s
and stuff.
And it's perfect because that's the time he comes back to the United States. So he's back in New York again, practicing a little bit of law or that sort of thing. But here's an opportunity. Veterans, monuments, Gettysburg, Civil War battlefields. So mid 1886, he gets himself appointed as chairman of the New York Monuments Commission. That's a big deal, right?
That's great,
right? That's great. Well, see,
great.
That's great.
I mean, I commend him for this. I mean, he's doing that, you know.
And commendable stuff here.
How does it end for him?
We haven't gotten there yet, Matt, as you would say. Yeah.
So go ahead. Tell the rest of the story. Is going to be
one of your let's go to the end stories first?
No. Get there in your own time, and then we'll...
No, but the thing with the New York Monuments Commission is for decades, right? For decades, he's active with the veterans. He's active at reunions, monument dedications. He plays an active part in putting New York monuments on the battlefield, where they're going to be placed, all that stuff. So really active. But the thing with all of that is it gives him an opportunity to speak. And as he's talking to the groans from the audience, so we see where this is going. And I think that's the period then where he's going to talk about Gettysburg. And then it morphs into General Meade didn't know anything about Gettysburg when he criticized me in his report and all of that stuff. And that's really when the Meade bashing kicks in.
So when his tenure with the commission there is over, why does it end?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. So it goes on. So it goes on for decades.
Yeah.
Decades.
Right.
Decades of good, honest service to the people of New York.
So you've made that point for decades. It's good and honest service.
Yeah.
However, it ends how?
So 1912. New York does an audit of the books, and some money is missing.
What a shock!
Yeah, what a shock!
Oh boy,
$28,000. I mean, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
You buy a trailer for $28,000. I mean, it's a big deal. You know. But all joking aside, yes,
sure.
They do an audit because somebody's going to say he's defending Sickles. All joking aside, $28,000 is missing. New York wants their money back. Who are you going to go to? Chairman Sickles.
Sure.
And Sickles says, I don't have any receipts for it. I don't have any vouchers for it. Now, by that time, because we skipped...
But is he admitting that he took it?
Well, not really. Because by that time, we've skipped way ahead here, right? He's now in his mid-90s.
Right.
The faculties are failing. The mind is going. And he had blown through a big inheritance he had gotten from his father, so he's bankrupt.
Oh, jeez.
There's a lot going on.
Okay.
But he says, basically, don't have the vouchers, and I'm the chairman. I'll take responsibility for it. So to your question, Well,
all right. Now hold on, because I gotta tip my hat to him there, Because let's say of course he did do it. We all know this.
Yeah.
Deep in our hearts, we know this.
Yeah.
But that he said, well, I didn't do it, but I'll take the fall. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'll give him
that too?
I'll give him half a point on that one.
Yeah, all right.
But go ahead. So, all right, but that's later in his life, you're saying. So,
well, that's how it ends. That was your question. How's it end? Because you were dying to get to
I had to get that. I had to let people know that the guy embezzled some money, maybe,
and he did.
Allegedly.
And I think if you look at it, I think when the amount of time it serves his term with the commission, his advanced age or that sort of thing, I don't personally think it's criminal malice. I think it's negligence. It's like putting your grandfather in charge of, thousands of, tens of thousands of dollars of public money. And what I really think it is I think it's negligence. And I think that speaks a lot to his character, going all the way back to the beginning of our show here when we talked about him being a spoiled only child, and we talked about how things start well and end badly for him. It's another example of that. Yeah. And I think, disorganization, advancing age, carelessness, I think is really at the cause of the missing money. That's my take.
Someone who embodies the old saying, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He is who he is.
You bring you with you,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so but now you, as you've stressed, he was part of the Monuments Commission for decades.
Yes.
So that wasn't the only thing he was doing during those decades, was it?
No, I mean that's the thing he's primarily remembered for. He does other work in New York City again with the law. He goes back to Congress, which is maybe where you're going with the question. He's reelected to Congress, and of course, in
New York.
Yes, in New York. That wasn't where I was going. Elected to Congress from New York.
From New York.
But of course, in 1895,
okay,
introduces the legislation
that's where I was going.
Gettysburg National Military Park.
So now, what does this legislation say?
Yeah. So what we call today the Sickles bill basically authorizes the government to buy land from the GBMA, basically buy the land that encompasses Gettysburg National Military Park, including the National Cemetery, and then also boundaries and the Sickles map, which he helps create, further establishes the boundaries. So it's basically the legislation that buys the GBMA land to create the beginning of Gettysburg National Military Park.
And there's that old story about someone asking why there wasn't a statue to him or a monument to him, and he says, the whole thing is my monument or whatever. Is that true, or is that a
that's
Spangler Spring type of legend?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's kind of apocryphal. Now, Tim and I have talked about this many times over the years. He swears he remembers, or at least at the time, he swore he remembered seeing an original version of that, but couldn't kind of remember where or when or that sort of thing. I've never been able to find the original citation of that. So it's supposed to be at the 50th anniversary, 1913. He dies less than a year later. His friend, Chaplain Joe Twitchell, is taking him around the battlefield. Twitchell supposedly says, what do you think about not having a monument? He supposedly says, well, don't worry, Joe, the whole damn battlefield is my monument.
Okay.
I got a copy of Twitchell's diary, which some of the early biographers cited for that conversation. Mm-hmm. Guess what?
Not there.
Twitchell's diary, not there.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
So the early historians cited the diary for that story, but the story is not in that diary.
Exactly.
So they were lying.
They were wrong. Or as Tim would say, those guys were so wrong.
Sickles. So we still don't know. So in other words,
it's like the man who shot Liberty Valance, right?
Yeah.
If it didn't happen that way, it should have.
Right.
Because it sounds like a thing Sickles should have said. But can't find an original citation on that. And I've looked.
All right. And then so he anything you want to add now before we get to his death?
Let's just kill him.
All right, let's kill him.
Because we go into details after the break.
We'll go with
We're back after the break, right?
So he gets towards the end of his life, 94?
Yeah, depending on 95.
94, 95 years old. Pretty good life. By the way, the great Betty White just died at 99 years old a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And the world mourns.
Yes.
17 days. Her birthday is January 17th. She couldn't hold out another 17 days to make it an even 100 years old.
That's sad.
God, Betty. God. Take two, Betty. What?
Madden should have waited.
Madden?
John Madden.
Oh, he died?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he did die too.
Oh,
Yeah, over the holidays. Yeah.
He lived just as long enough to see his like a very nice documentary though.
how old was he when he died?
85.
85?
He didn't stop living the good life.
Yeah.
He stayed
Wow.
the same size.
Yeah, well, he's a large
Kind
man.
of like Dan Sickles,
He's
still
like-
living a
yeah,
good life.
there you go.
Right. John Madden, Dan Sickles,
Yeah.
so much in common.
Gout in the remaining foot, and yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so how does he die? Just dies? Old age?
Yeah, I mean, so I think a cerebral hemorrhage is the official cause of death.
That'll do it.
It's less than a year after after his last visit here to Gettysburg. His family, his second wife, and his estranged son are with him. When he succumbs in May of 1914.
His son,
New York.
his estranged son, was that with Teresa?
No, we didn't cover that. While he was in Europe, the whole Queen Isabella thing, he had the affair with Queen Isabella, but he ended up marrying one of her younger and hotter attendants.
Naturally.
Yeah, so they got married. They apparently never got along. She thought he had money. He thought she had money. Kind of thing.
But neither thought to ask.
Yeah. But one of the things that union did produce was a son and a daughter.
Ah, okay.
Mid 60s, one leg. He's in Spain.
I'm telling you, man. Whatever. Wait, hold on, Eric.
No, you don't want that. Never mind.
Well, no, but was he considered? This is one thing I wanted to know with all the womanizing he's doing. Was he considered a good-looking man at that era? Because I'm looking at his picture here.
I know. Well, okay, let me get that for you.
Thank you.
There you go. Let me get
Thanks.
that for you.
Thanks very much, James.
Exactly.
Let me just take a look at it. Yeah, no, I mean here.
I hear you.
Okay, here I would say he's like handsome.
He looks good in the uniform.
Right, like
uniform.
but this is made for him. He's posed.
Sure.
He's in a uniform.
On my tours, on my little battlefield tours, I will often ask the women, they'll hold up a picture, a similar one, say, "What do you think? Do you find him attractive?" And they will all, no.
Yeah.
So certainly by the modern definition, he doesn't seem to fit. But the thing with him is, and there's the New York news, there's a newspaper account that talks about this. They call him suave and courteous. So I think there's a sort of 18th century being suave kind of thing that he's gotten figured out. And I think the charm, right? You guys know this. The charm can overcome some physical limitations, right? Exactly. Right? I think it's more of that.
I could see handsome. Handsome is a word that I would use for someone who's not hard to look at, but not someone you would desire.
Yeah.
So they make a striking figure in a uniform or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
They're handsome, but they're not like hot.
He's not like Hancock.
No,
he's not a Hancock.
No, he's not a pretty boy.
But he's more attractive than a Meade.
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
Who are the handsome men of Gettysburg? Who do your women consider? I'm sure Barlow. Matt loves Barlow.
Well, I wonder that.
Well, why don't you do a whole episode on that when I'm not here?
Okay.
When I'm not here, do that. But,
Jeff Caravello's Handsome Men of Gettysburg. Okay, great. All right. So, and then one other thing I wanted to ask you, though, that from what I remember reading at one point somewhere, is that did he, when he was general and runaway slaves would come into his lines, he refused to return them, and he would employ them, right? Or something?
Well, he would refuse to return them, and like when the slave hunters would come into camp, he would order them out of the camp. And there's a story about that where he actually defies Hooker at one point. Hooker gives these guys permission to come into camp, and Sickles orders them out of his camp. So
that's so weird.
Yeah, I mean there isn't in my mind, there isn't a huge record about what did Sickles think about, slavery and African American relations and all of that stuff. I think he was probably a man of his time, kind of thing.
Right.
Maybe we should leave it at that.
Okay. All right, good. All right, we're going to take a break now and come back. I'm going to drink a lot of water.
Yeah, this chair hurts.
I know, I'm sorry.
Get up here for a break.
I know. We're getting new stools. They're coming any day now. I got to take some water. I got to take a water break because we got a lot of questions here, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of words to read. I need a wet mouth. So we'll be right back.
You've heard us promote various ways that you can help us keep the show going, but one way we haven't pushed too much is our sutlery at addressinggettysburg.com/shop. That's a shame because we have designs over there by talented artists like Ty DeWitt of 1863 Designs and Mike Stretch of the Heritage Depot. So now we're promoting it. Buying shirts, hoodies, mugs, and other items from our sutlery not only helps us keep the lights on, but it also helps guys like Ty and Mike, and it helps spread the word about the show every time you wear an item or you sip from your mug. So head over to addressinggettysburg.com/shop and grab some merch. It's the perfect Christmas gift for the Gettys nerd in your family. That's addressinggettysburg.com/shop.
Well, the 2021 season is over, but that doesn't mean you can't get a jump on next season. In fact, Gettys Bike Tours will reward those who do so with a 15% discount. All you got to do is book a tour for 2 people or more between now and March 31st of 2022, and you'll receive 15% off your tour. So call 717-752-7752 and book today. Discount only applies to tours. Winter is coming. But that doesn't mean there's no reason for you to come to Gettysburg. In fact, there are more reasons for you to come to Gettysburg. Don't believe me? Well, how about not having to wait an hour and a half for a table at your favorite restaurant? How about not having to sit in traffic for a half an hour just to go 2 blocks in town? Are those not enough for you? Okay. How about seeing the battlefield with no leaves on the trees or corn that grows taller than a man to obscure your views? Now you'll actually be able to see the lay of the land. Now I've got your interest. All right, what about this? Licensed battlefield guides that we have on the show have less hectic schedules, and they're able to take you on a tour that will enhance that better visibility. Just as I thought. Now you're with me. And now that you are, head over to addressinggettysburg.com/LBG or call 717-693-0182 for larger groups. That's addressinggettysburg.com/LBG or 717-693-0182.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
Okay, we're back, and to start off the questioning, who is somebody that you, of course, all know and love, and we're going to first find out, though, how are you recovering 6 questions lengths? You've been injured. How are you doing?
Apparently not as quick as Dan Sickles to get back to the field. But no, I'm coming along well.
Okay, good.
Right now, my hamstring's healing and my hip's healing very well.
And I, on behalf of you, would like to thank our listeners who donated to your GoFundMe.
Yes. Absolutely. The response was tremendous. I met my goal and exceeded it.
Great.
And so it's been absolutely great since I've been out of work for the last
So you were more than funded.
Oh, absolutely.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for doing that. You've got some questions for Jim, and I thought I would let you start off the questioning here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to send questions in for our Ask a Guide, you have to become a patron. Patrons know ahead of time what we're going to do in the future. So it's like you get to be able to predict the future without actually predicting because we just tell you. But anyway, my point is that's what you have to do. And you go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg to become a patron. Michael, of course, you are a patron, so you get to ask these questions. So go ahead, ask away. I'm going to go over here and stretch my legs.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm settling in for a long round here.
They don't call me 6 questions for nothing. All right. So I have listening to the episode already right now and the recording. It seems to me that Sickles makes a lot of decisions that are impulsive. And a lot of those decisions are based off of emotions. So can you describe what his decision-making process was like based on that?
Yeah, and so I think, and thanks, Mike, I have publicly in the past, you've seen some of the presentations, I've publicly in the past described Sickles as an emotional decision maker, basically what you just said. And emotional decision makers, that's a real thing. They have characteristics, and what they do is they tend to get tunnel vision. They tend to focus on their situation, their problem, often to the exclusion of the big picture. And you could argue certainly, obviously, the murder of Philip Barton Key was at least emotionally charged and impulsive. That goes without saying. But if you look at the situation at Gettysburg, morning of July 2nd, 1863, he's got these verbal instructions from Meade to do one thing. Sickles becomes convinced that he knows better, and that instead of following Meade's instructions, we should move forward. I'm not getting the attention I need from headquarters. I'm positive Confederates are going to come bouncing out of the woods onto my flank. And he gets himself, I think, for lack of a better word, really kind of worked up into this emotional, impulsive kind of, I got to do something. And he does it. And I think that's a classic example of, at least when he makes the big decisions in his life, how he does that.
And that seems rather consistent also with Chancellorsville and the night attack, the midnight attack and things.
I got to do something. We got our asses kicked today. I got to do something. And, it's not the greatest idea in the world.
So it leads to the end of his life and when he died and where he is buried. Why is Daniel Sickles buried in Arlington?
Well, your very own Tim Smith had at least something to do with that, in a way. I'll explain. I probably should explain.
Tim got him buried at Arlington?
Well, the look that I just got from Matt on that.
Tim's fault.
So when he died, his second wife, there was talk initially that he was going to be buried here at Gettysburg. And the second wife was working on that. They wired the park officials. There was talk that, he was going to be here at Gettysburg. However, Sickles' lawyer then came forward and said, no, Dan had told me that he wanted to be buried at Arlington. And they said, okay, well, that's what the closest we have to his wishes, so they buried him at Arlington. Now, where Tim comes into this is, which I just thought you might enjoy the story. Over the years, Sickles enthusiasts have at times made efforts to try to get Sickles reburied here at Gettysburg. And so a number of years ago, maybe it was like during the mid-90s, Tim would know the year. I mentioned it in the Sickles book. I forget the year. But anyways, there was a specific Sickles reenactor, guy by the name of Red Davis and a couple of other individuals. They were working on trying to get Sickles moved to Gettysburg under the pretense that the wishes of Sickles' spouse should supersede the wishes of the attorney. And so they were working on it, and Tim came forward and said, no, I found the newspaper account that says Sickles wanted this.
Right.
And Tim, your very own Tim Smith played a part in keeping Sickles at Arlington.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, exactly.
Like, that isn't cool. I don't know what is.
Yeah, Tim hates him so much that he actually
didn't want him here.
He forged that newspaper article.
Right.
Cool. All right, what else you got there?
Same off of Arlington. When you visit it, in that area, you get William Stark Rosecrans has a headstone.
Nelson
Miles has a mausoleum for crying out loud. Why does Sickles just have a simple Arlington headstone?
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know, as Mike just said, Sickles has a very simple Dan Sickles, day to death, and that sort of thing. And the reason is because he was bankrupt. And so when he died, he was bankrupt. And I touched on it a little bit before the break, but he had blown through an inheritance that he had received from his father in, I think, the early 1890s. And he didn't have money. So he didn't have the money to do a more elaborate stone. And so you get, if that's the case, you get the simple government stone, which is what Sickles got.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it all comes back to money.
Yeah.
So the question also, my next question is, going back to Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg, how did the veterans of the Third Corps see Daniel Sickles? Was it favorable? Were they in any way resentful or bitter? How did they see him?
Yeah, and obviously you can't speak for all of them, but what I think comes through consistently in the memoirs and the post-war accounts is an admiration for him. And I think what you consistently see, there's one account, I think it's John Haley, 17th Maine, he fought in the wheat field. Haley says something to the effect of, old Dan was a game bird, and if you ever felt fear, he always knew how to hide it. And I think that kind of summarizes how they looked at him. They knew they had served under a fighting general, a guy who, at least in their view, was out there on the field with them. And I think they admired him for that. I think they got caught up in all of the, the post-war Meade-Sickles stuff. Was Sickles right? Was he wrong? Kind of thing. And I think they often would tend to bias more towards Sickles' favor, or they would kind of say stuff like, well, we haven't really decided that yet. Kind of the whole controversy. But I think they liked serving under him. And, now one guy once said, well, what difference does that make? The enlisted enlisted man seldom sees the big picture. Well, maybe true, but you know whether you like the guy above you or not. In Sickles' case, a lot of them did.
How was he looked at by his peers in the Army?
Yeah, and that's more mixed, obviously. Yeah. And, I talked about it in the Sickles book, but we always harp on Sickles being the non-West Pointer, but there was the West Point clique, and there's what David Burney called the engineer clique. Obviously engineering was a big part of the West Point curriculum.
Sure.
Meade, Warren, Humphreys, those guys very much engineers by trade. So the engineer clique obviously looked down on Sickles, and for obvious reasons. But David Burney in the Army was a Sickles supporter. Regis de Trobriand was a Sickles supporter. Obviously Joe Hooker was a Sickles supporter. So there were guys who looked favorably upon him.
And a lot of that favorable after the war is concerned, the rank and file. How much is that due to his involvement with Veterans Affairs?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that's a big part of it. There's an anecdote from Kelly, the monument sculptor. If you have the book Generals in Bronze, he's got some great Sickles anecdotes in that. And one of the implications is kind of like, yeah, these guys love Sickles because, he shows up, he's got whiskey, he's got cigars, maybe it was unstated, he's got women with him and all of that stuff. So I do think, Sickles during that era, Mike, was, a great speech giver. A great speaker, he gets them fired up. There's plenty of accounts of he comes into the tent, woo, the standing ovation and all of that stuff. And he knew how to work the crowd and I think get the veterans fired up. And I do think, in the long post-war years, that might have colored their battlefield perceptions of him a little bit.
And also what I know of him, he also intervened on their behalf sometimes when things needed to be worked through the Washington machinery.
Like who?
I'm thinking of the pension for George Sears Green. What was his involvement in trying to get a pension for George Sears Green? What's that story?
Well, geez, that's a good question, Mike. And I think kind of framing that generally first. That is a good point. He would often intervene when he could to help these guys out. And if somebody, in the case of Green and the pension, if somebody was held up or they needed a little push, who are you going to call? You're going to call Dan Sickles, and Sickles would write letters. Knocked on some doors, bust some heads even a little bit to get that sort of thing done. So, Matt, that's 3 good things.
I think we're up to
yeah. That's a great point. That's a great point.
Well, that's all the questions I have.
3 good. Wow,
that was good.
That was
good, Mike.
You're working at a deficit tonight, but very good.
I'm moved to tears, Mike. I'm weeping. I'm emotionally moved here on Mike.
Well, let's see if anybody else can emotionally move you. Thank you, Mike. And Jeff, if you have a question at any point, just raise your hand and I'll let you use the mic. Debbie Cross wants to know. She says, hi, this is more of a comment. Okay. Than a question. Dan Sickles had a life of notoriety, was a colorful character, could be vindictive and nasty and murdery. But all fans and devotees of Gettysburg owe him so much for his huge role in preserving Gettysburg National Military Park. It's a debt that can never be repaid. It just goes to show that there is light and dark, in everyone. Thanks, Debbie Neffcross. You're welcome, Debbie.
Yeah.
Would you like to respond to that?
I would like to respond to that. Hi, Debbie. I know Debbie. And, I don't know her, but I know Debbie.
Okay.
So I think, first of all, great observation. And I think that light and dark, that was basically reiterated in his obituary. When he died in 1914, you read his obituary in the New York Times, and they talk about that, a stirring career that sometimes, had its aspects of highs and lows. So I think she pretty much hits that on the head. He's not, nobody. Unless you're talking like about a Hitler type of guy, and Dan Sickles is not Hitler.
Right.
So if you're kind of looking like history's villains, there's Hitler, and then there's
Dan Sickles.
And then there's guys kind of on those lower shelves who do good things and bad things.
Of course.
That's what people do.
He's a flawed human being just like the rest of us.
Exactly. And it's some more than others. But
yes.
Yeah. But the only other thing I do want to, real quick, because she mentioned the establishment of Gettysburg National Military Park, I have encountered historians, colleagues over the years who have kind of said, big deal. If he hadn't, put through that Sickles bill, somebody else would have done it. Or,
how do they know that?
Nicholson did more, or McConaughey did more than Sickles did.
Two actors? Come on.
No. But that's revisionism.
Yes.
You can't say, well, big deal if Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. Somebody else would have, kind of thing. Doesn't matter if somebody else would have. Sickles had the desire and the ability to put through the Sickles bill, and you should give him credit for that.
Yeah,
so thanks,
absolutely. Colin Seyerveld says, thanks so much for doing this. Can Jim explain Dan Sickles' role on July 1st? How does he deal with conflicting orders? And ultimately, how does July 1st get excluded from Sickles' battle narrative? Thanks again. You guys are appreciated. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Okay, so July 1st... So remember, the 3rd Corps is part of the wing that's being commanded by John Reynolds. So it's Reynolds, it's Howard in the 11th Corps, and then it's Sickles in the 3rd Corps. July 1st, Sickles is in Emmitsburg, while Reynolds and Howard are moving to Gettysburg. At some point during the day, Sickles probably receives the Pipe Creek Circular, which would, if 3rd Corps with the rest of Reynolds' wing is supposed to go down to Middleburg. But while he's getting that, at the same time, he's getting requests from from Reynolds, and then after Reynolds is killed, from Howard, to come up to Gettysburg to the sound of the fighting. So, yeah, he's getting these conflicting orders. Do I follow Meade's orders? Do I go to the fighting? What do I do? And, historians have always credited Sickles with, quote-unquote, marching to the sound of the guns. I was a little harder on him in my book on that. I just kind of pointed out that uncertainty that he goes through before making his decision does consume a lot of hours. And, had he come up faster, 11th Corps and 1st Corps probably could have used some help at Gettysburg. So he ultimately deals with the uncertainty by leaving a couple of brigades at Emmitsburg, coming up to Gettysburg. That's the decision he makes. But again, with some uncertainty in there, does burn a little bit of time in between. But historians are typically favorable, to the idea that he comes forward and comes to Gettysburg.
Sure. All right, Tim Dolan. I heard an explanation once that Sickles originally moved to the Peach Orchard to be able to enfilade any Confederate attacks to his north along the fields of what is now Pickett's Charge, and that his whole line was meant to have its strength facing more northwest until the Confederates showed up on his flanks. Is there any truth to that claim?
Yeah, so I've never heard that claim.
I've never heard that
and
either.
I've never heard... that almost sounds like something...
It's me.
What? It was you?
Yeah, no, I say that all the time. That's how it makes sense to me.
Do you really? You really say that?
All right.
To my mind, it makes perfect sense.
So Tim heard it on the show.
I guess not on the show. He probably heard one of your corner chats. Yeah.
Oh, there. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay. So that's your theory. So explain it now. Go ahead. Go through it.
So from my point of view, the proposed Sickles line, right, doesn't make any sense if you're trying to employ artillery.
Proposed, meaning what he was ordered to hold.
Yeah.
The cemetery bridge line.
It makes no sense to me because you can't really use artillery to any real effect from there.
It's a couple places. Yeah.
So knowing what Sickles theoretically knows on the morning of July 2nd, when he moves forward, and we were talking about this outside, right? He sends out the 3rd Maine and part of the 1st U.S. sharpshooters out to Pitzer's Woods. They run into the right of A.P. Hill's Corps, which confirms what Sickles theoretically knows, that the right end of the Confederate line is there. So he moves his corps forward, and I again, this is all in my head. This is all speculation. It makes sense to me that you would put your corps there because you're now threatening A.P. Hill's right flank. And you make your line heavy on the right and light on the left.
Yeah.
You have to put somebody on the left because there's no cavalry there.
So you're guarding your left with that.
So that's why Ward and de Trobriand are where they are and spaced out like they are. Doesn't really expect anybody to come from there, but you have to screen your flanks somehow. And there's no cavalry down there.
Okay.
So all right.
No, that makes sense that he's reacting to Hill's guys because he doesn't know Longstreet's men or what they're going to do.
Nobody knows Longstreet's coming except Longstreet and Lee.
Right. So it can't be to slap them in the ass, but it's more for what he knows is already out there.
You're
That
in a
makes
pretty good spot.
sense.
If AP Hill's Corps starts to move forward, you can take them in flank from there.
All right.
Yeah.
But hey, anyways,
Jim Hessler, expert on the subject.
Well,
what is your...
Yeah, so no, that's interesting. And I would agree with part of that. I think if I'm looking at it as a historian in terms of, okay, why did Sickles and some of his supporters say that he moved forward? Certainly the artillery component is a big part of it.
Yeah.
And, that lower ground along Cemetery Ridge where a lot of the fields of fire would be blocked, whereas if you move further up on Cemetery Ridge, you're potentially at the mercy of Confederate artillery fire from Emmitsburg Road. So I think artillery definitely plays a part of the decision to move forward. I think, when you're trying to evaluate or assess terrain, some of the factors you're looking at would be observation and fields of fire, certainly, right? And I think he felt, and I'm not saying right, wrong, agree, disagree with him, but I think he felt by moving forward out of that low ground would get better observation, fields of fire, including for the artillery. Now, somebody listening is going to go, well, wait a minute, why didn't he just go to Round Top, where you have great observations?
I almost said that myself.
And there's no easy answer for that. We've never found an account where Sickles went to Little Round Top and said, oh, wow, what have you? We've never found that.
To my mind, it comes down to the artillery point again. You can put, one battery up there that can be used for gainful employment against anything
You can't
from the west, but not so much further north.
Yeah, and I think that could indeed be part of it. And I think what people forget, because the other one too, not even Little Round Top, but the one too everyone gets on is Munshauer Hill.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Munshauer Hill would be impregnable. I'm like, what? Really?
No.
And what happened was a number of years ago, when they were doing tree clearing, they cut the trees off of Munshauer Hill in North Little Round Top, and I still have the account. Eric Campbell, who's one of the legendary park rangers, basically said, I had never appreciated this hill because it was always covered by trees, and now with the trees gone, I kind of see how Little Round Top looms above it, and he appreciated the terrain. And over the years, people have transformed that into Munshauer Hill could support all the 3rd Corps batteries. 3rd Corps needs to deploy 30 artillery pieces. You ain't putting all those on Munshauer Hill either. So back to your point, artillery very well might have been part of it. And that was one of the things Sickles said influenced his move. Not the only thing he said, but definitely one.
Well, not the only thing he said. What else did he say? What is his excuse?
Well, so let's say what the excuses are. So I think the excuses are primarily artillery. I think, there's a Chancellorsville effect. There is either the perception that the enemy is going to come bouncing out of those woods onto his flank, which is a Chancellorsville effect that people seldom talk about, because we always talk about the Hazel Grove effect.
Right.
If you move further up, you go out like near where Father Corby or the New York Auxiliary Monument is today, you look at the Emmitsburg Road, you're at the mercy of the artillery. So there's that reason as well. And, Sickles called the low ground north of Little Round Top, he called it a hole. And he said, it's marshy, rocky, you can't see out in your front. And I wanted to get out of this hole and get out into what Sickles called commanding ground so that he could be seen. He could see the enemy. He could see the enemy and bring on the fight. And that's what he said. And those are the reasons that, 50 years, a lot of different reasons. But I think that kind of summarizes his big ones.
Okay. Joe Jacobs has a couple of questions here. How would you rate Sickles' overall performance at the Battle of Chancellorsville? Number one.
Yeah, okay, so we talked about the stuff. I won't go back to the stuff, but I think if I were giving him an overall rating, at Chancellorsville, I would say aggressive but questionable judgment. He's moving forward. He's not afraid to attack. Again, questionable judgment. He calls Jackson's move a retreat. The whole thing about the night action in the wilderness. Aggressive but questionable judgment is how I would put that.
All right, and then also, is the story of him at Gettysburg smoking a cigar true?
I kind of blew that apart in my Sickles book, and I didn't intend to. But what I always thought one of the coolest badass Sickles stories was the idea of, leg is amputated and, he's carried off the field smoking the cigar. And I was, that was always one of my favorite Sickles stories.
Yeah.
So when I was doing the research on the Sickles book, all I was really trying to do was come up with a couple of good primary accounts that would cover that. And I couldn't really find any. Everything was always sort of, well, I saw him at the hospital smoking his cigar. I saw him on the Baltimore Pike smoking his cigar. But that whole carried off the field with the cigar, you couldn't find that. Eventually, there is an account with one of the enlisted men that says, I pulled the cigar out of your pocket, I put it in your mouth, I lit it for you, and you got carried off the field. And that ultimately becomes the heart of his Medal of Honor citation. That's the Medal of Honor is for encouraging the men after grievously wounded. So I tend to think the cigar thing is probably a myth.
Okay.
I do. Or, maybe even made up. But I tend to think it's probably more of a myth than reality. If it didn't happen that way, though,
it should have. Finally, he says, do you know the name of his horse at Gettysburg?
Oh, yeah. There's two versions of that. I've heard Tammany and I've heard Grape and Canister. Red Davis, who died a couple of years ago, but was a noted Sickles reenactor and expert, always told me he was riding Tammany at Gettysburg. But I know other guys who say Grape and Canister. So I think, like a lot of officers, he's got multiple horses. So take your pick over which one he's on when he gets wounded.
I think Grape and Canister would have been great, considering he got hit with a cannonball. All right, I put a piece of chocolate in my mouth at the wrong time. Hold on a second. God, I got a lot of cutting to do on this one.
This chair's getting hard while you're chewing.
All right, I'm going to get through this as quick as I can. All right.
We're back.
Like a dog with peanut butter.
Okay, here we go. Rick Scarce, he says, my first questions for the podcast. Thanks for considering them, and please don't use them all. I'm not vying with Mike for the multi-question title. Wow. Keep up the awesome, entertaining work. Jim, I've heard you mention that his Chancellorsville experience almost certainly had a role in Sickles creating his salient. Would you elaborate on that thinking? In particular, can you tell us more about his position in May, the terrain and disposition of his corps versus July? I'm familiar with Gettysburg, but not Chancellorsville.
Okay. We touched on it a little bit in the bio segment, but Hazel Grove is sort of a broad, flat, open elevation at Chancellorsville, not unlike the Emmitsburg Road Ridge, where our very own peach orchard is. Hazel Grove is in front of what would have been the main Union line, and so the similarities are that. And the idea was, as we said before, a lot of people assume Sickles at Gettysburg is trying to avoid a repeat of Hazel Grove, and that he's going to move forward at Gettysburg to prevent the Confederates from getting artillery, like in the position like they did at Chancellorsville. The biggest challenge with the Hazel Grove theory is that you go through all of Sickles' speeches, his writings, his letters, all of that stuff. He talks about artillery, but he never specifically says, I did it because of Hazel Grove.
Okay.
And kind of going back to what I was saying before, every time he talks about Chancellorsville that I've ever encountered, and I know other guys like Rich Core and Tim and other guys who, I've kind of tried to put our heads together over the years and say, hey, have you ever seen a Hazel Grove, analogy? And they always say no. But every time he talks about Chancellorsville, he always talks about the Jackson and Howard thing, the shock that Howard experienced at Chancellorsville of being on the flank, having the enemy come out of the woods, and being right on top of you is something he didn't want to repeat at Gettysburg. And it goes back to what we said a few minutes ago. Move forward, get out of my hole, get closer to him, get on the commanding ground. Historians love the Hazel Grove analogy, but it'd be nice if we could find a case where Sickles actually said
that this what I was thinking.
Yeah, it would help.
But it also makes sense if you look at the way he positioned his line.
Oh, yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And as we said before, it's 2 months to the day. You're certainly replaying that last battle and thinking, okay, well, what do I want to do to avoid that last battle? So Hazel Grove is popular because it makes sense.
Right.
You just wish he would say it.
Tim M. says, there are so many questions on the topic of Sickles.
That there are.
My question is, did Sickles realize or admit at any time that because of his actions, his line created undefendable gaps? Didn't the need for reinforcements make it clear to him that he had screwed up? I mean, I would imagine.
Oh, Tim.
I would imagine, you see all these reinforcements coming. Like, by the time he realized that it was too late.
Well, yeah. So there's a couple things here. First of all, no, he never admitted in those terms that, I created indefensible gaps. And that, in fact,
the opposite, right?
Yeah, that becomes the heart of the Meade-Sickles controversy. But part of what he does, remember, this is Dan Sickles, attorney / politician. You know how to spin a story and present your case, right? Mm-hmm. Part of what he does is he says Meade promised him support, and that he moved forward knowing that he would get this promised support from Meade. So, yeah, it's kind of the opposite. Like, hey, I know I need reinforcements. You're going to bring them up for me, right? And in Sickles' spinning of the story, Meade said, yeah, we'll bring up more artillery. We'll get the 5th Corps over here. We'll get Hancock and the 2nd Corps. In Sickles' spinning of it, yeah, I know I needed reinforcements, and damn it, that's why I did it, kind of thing. So he's kind of spinning it to the opposite of Tim's question. But that's Dan Sickles.
Yeah, and then doesn't he have a conversation with Longstreet years later, and Longstreet says something like, "You took the punch out of my attack," or something?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of Longstreet stuff, reunions and things they do on the battlefield and all that stuff. And Longstreet, to his dying day, basically said, "Look, you move forward, you cut off all my room to maneuver. Again, my avenue, what we would call today avenues of approach. You cut off all my working room." And Longstreet, went to his grave saying that he thought Sickles' move was better for the Union cause. Now, again, maybe Tom Berenger's listening. People groan when they hear that. Is it Longstreet defending his buddy, or did Longstreet really believe it?
Right.
Who knows?
And didn't Sickles run around saying, well, Longstreet said that?
Well, he did. That's it. And so anytime Sickles got into trouble, he pulls out this letter from Longstreet. and Longstreet says, he is. I won the Battle of Gettysburg. I mean, it's great. It's great.
He's carrying it around like a clean STD test.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. You got what I was saying, right? Yeah, like a scumbag would do.
That was weird.
All right, Kevin.
That was awkward.
Kevin Randolph says, what was the general or specific feeling about Sickles by his Corps during and after the war? So we kind of touched on that with Mike, but...
Yeah, we did. So, I'll just sort of do the counterpoint of that because we talked about guys who liked Sickles. Mm-hmm. Obviously, other guys like Andrew Humphreys, George Meade, people who supported Meade. Frank Haskell is not obviously Haskell doesn't live very long, but, Frank Haskell and his writings is not a Sickles fan. So there was definitely an undercurrent of anti-Sickles in the Army. And again, when I read it, it's less about the non-West Point thing, although that's definitely a factor. And there is the undercurrent of, oh my God, the man who killed Barton Key, kind of thing.
Right.
So some of them, just don't like him because he's Dan Sickles.
Because he's Sickles, yeah. Gordy Morgan, he says, gentlemen, thanks for taking my question. I could never understand why the Army would trust the lives of its soldiers with a non-professional. I understand that recruiting played a big part, but what was the logic behind giving battlefield commands to men like Dan Sickles, who had no experience? Thanks, and keep up the good work. You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the question, Gordy. Was Gordy?
Yep.
And again, we touched on it a little bit in the bio section, but Lincoln needs wide demographics to support what is for him an unpopular war effort. Mm-hmm. And in Sickles' case, Sickles brings New York to the table. He brings Democrats. He brings fighting Democrats to the table. And I think in Lincoln's view, those are the kinds of guys that he needs, to win over popular support. Now, let me just sort of read the second part of this question. The thing, though, about trusting their lives with a non-professional,
they didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, I would just remind people that I think when you look at people's West Point Civil War resumes, a West Point education does not translate to success on a battlefield. Mm-mm. George McClellan, great organizer, not battlefield success. John Pope. I mean, you could go on and on with these West Point guys who don't turn that into success. And you look at some guys. I mean, I'm trying to think. Nelson Miles, who we talked about before. Nelson Miles is not a West Pointer. I'm looking at your Joshua Chamberlain sticker on the back of your laptop here. Mm-hmm. I think it's less about who went to West Point and what is your own personal abilities. The Peter Principle.
Yeah, I mean,
Peter Principle.
I would remind who was that said that? Gordy.
Gordy, yeah.
I would remind Gordy and anybody is that the America of that day was not the America of today. Today, you need to have degrees coming out your butt.
Right.
You need to have so much experience, so much of this, so much of that.
Right.
Back then, if you were willing to do it and you succeeded, then you would get the star or the bird or whatever.
Right.
So, I mean, they were more of a meritorious society then than we are now. Now we're a prerequisite society. You have to meet all these criteria, and then you can go ahead and do it. Whereas back then, it was just like, I'll try it, and then and you did. I mean, it's a country of.
Well, you know what I would say, just kind of for my closing part of that is, and I said this before in the bio section, but I'll say it again. What I think Sickles' biggest shortcoming is not lack of West Point experience. It's lack of experience at the division and the corps level. That 1862 period we talked about before, I think hurts him a lot more than lack of West Point does.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good point because, again, you bring up Chamberlain.
Yeah.
Lieutenant colonel up to major general by the end of the war.
Yeah, so maybe you take it a little slower, you get the experience, and Sickles kind of does that, which, hurts him.
Yeah. Chaplain Cox, always good to have Jim on the show,
Well,
he says.
Chaplain.
I have two questions. First, the 3rd Corps arrived up the Emmitsburg Road and spent the night near the peach orchard. Yeah. That means that Sickles saw that ground before moving to his assigned line on Munshowers Hill. Why isn't that fact ever brought up in the meetings that took place between him and Meade in the morning of the 2nd? We'll start with that one. He has two questions.
Yeah, I don't know how much it is or isn't brought up in the conversations between Meade and Sickles. You could argue how much Sickles himself physically sees when he gets on the field. He gets on the field early evening of July 1st, probably goes up to Cemetery Hill to converse with Howard and Slocum and those guys to see what the situation is. He is reportedly still on Cemetery Hill, at 1 a.m. when Meade arrives on the field. So how much Sickles actually saw during that period, I think is debatable. But what I will say is if you ever approach Gettysburg and the Peach Orchard from Emmitsburg, so if you're coming north up the Emmitsburg Road, right? You're coming north up the Emmitsburg Road.
Yeah.
The Peach Orchard on the horizon looks like kind of a looming hill.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't see anything beyond it. You can't see Gettysburg. You can't see Cemetery. It looks like a big hill.
Yeah.
And it's so deceptive that when you get to the top of that point on the Emmitsburg Road Ridge, you look to your right and Little Round Top is over there. They almost look like they're the same elevation.
Yeah, they do.
So, if you're talking about first impressions of the battlefield, I would argue that Sickles' first impression might have been, damn, this is a good hill. I mean,
sure.
You never know. Yeah. So.
And then secondly, how is it possible for the 10,000 troops, Eric's favorite word, of the 3rd Corps and Buford's cavalry, Eric's favorite branch, to not see Captain Johnston's recon that morning? Did they already leave the Peach Orchard by 0600?
That's interesting. That's a twist on the standard question, right? Because the standard question is always, how did Johnston not see these guys? Yeah. This is how did they not? Well, maybe Buford's screen just wasn't as effective along the Emmitsburg Road as we like to think it would be. I mean, Buford's stretched over several miles. Johnston's small party, in the pre-dawn, or post-dawn darkness, could probably slip through a cavalry screen pretty easily. Now, why didn't anybody in the 3rd Corps, kind of,
right?
Hey, who's that guy in gray over there? There's a lot of guys around. Johnston probably did a good job of keeping himself concealed, or maybe he didn't get the Little Round Top.
Right. Right.
So I mean, I think a lot of that. I think a lot of the answer to that question would depend on where Johnston got, and of course, we don't really know where he got. But it's an intriguing question. I like how Chaplain Cox kind of spun those around from tradition.
Yeah, that is pretty good. Chaplain, there's an episode we did with Chris Army back in the spring, I think, about Captain Johnston's ride. You might want to go back and look at that because we discussed like who was where and when, as far as we know. And I don't remember exactly what we came up with there. But
well, and of course we got all the way to the end, and I asked if it even mattered.
Right.
I think that was the last time Chris was on the show.
Yeah, that's true. He said, "Shut up, leave me alone."
But you're right. At the end of the day, we always say this: where Johnston got doesn't matter as much as what he told Lee, and what he led Lee to think. But that's a show for a different time.
Yeah, all right. So let's see. Todd Rhodes. He says,
chair here, man.
Here, I know. Sorry. I promise. The next time you're on, the chair is going to be more comfortable.
Foam
It's going to have a bigger butt. It's going to have a better wheelbase. Don't
you
worry.
remember like on Saturday Night Live when they did the Five Timers Club and they all got the nice high back chairs? Well, I have one of those.
Yeah, we should. Well, because we do a 10 timers club.
Oh,
yeah,
all right,
5 ain't nothing. You got to get here 10 times. All right. So here are some questions for Mr. Hessler. He says there are several examples of apparent or at least potential insubordination during the Battle of Gettysburg.
Swapping chairs here, folks.
Barlow's. Whoa, that was Eric's head. See, that's what happens to people.
I'm all right.
They.
Try that one out.
Hold that thought, folks. Oh yeah, that's much. Thank
That's
you,
much
Eric.
better,
Thank you,
right?
Eric. That's much better.
All right, here we go then. Let's
Try to bring this home.
During the Battle of Gettysburg, Barlow's move out to the knoll, Smith's refusal to fight at night on Culp's Hill on July 2nd, and of course, Sickles and the Peach Orchard are three that I can think of offhand. Did anyone face a court-martial or other disciplinary action after Gettysburg? If not, why not?
Again, another good question, right? Because we today are so critical of all these guys.
Mm-hmm.
You almost never hear anybody saying, "Why wasn't Barlow court-martialed?" or sort of thing. But that always comes down to Sickles. If I had to answer that question, why not? I think the word is probably victory, right?
Right.
I think
there's no one to blame when you win.
Yeah, you win. Look, mistakes are made in a victory, but if a win is still a win kind of thing. And I think between that, I can't imagine winning the big battle in Pennsylvania and yet still chopping off heads and pointing fingers at everybody. I don't think that would have been great for the morale of the Army. And at the same time, Meade's got other things to worry about.
Right.
So I think, obviously, had we lost, now we're going to go after Barlow. Now we're going to go after Sickles and that sort of thing. But who's the one guy who immediately comes to mind is Doubleday, right?
Mm-hmm.
He ends up he doesn't get court-martialed. I'm not saying he gets court-martialed, but what do? You kind of send guys like that away.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's
now the Confederates did lose the battle. Do you know of anyone in the Confederate Army who was court-martialed for their performance here?
That's a good question. And again, what immediately comes to mind is sending people away, like Iverson is eventually sent away.
You just put them in another department and let them worry about it.
And I think while I can't speak for every facet of the Army, I think these guys are too busy fighting a war. When Sickles started slinging mud at Meade in the spring of '64. Remember, Meade requests a court of inquiry, and what do Lincoln and Halleck tell him? No, you're busy, man. You're busy. Go fight the war. Don't get into these newspaper battles. And I think fighting the war is probably what both sides want to focus on.
All right, Sickles claimed to have requested permission to move out to the Peach Orchard prior to ordering the Third Corps forward. As I understand it, Meade never responded, so Sickles took it upon himself to move forward. Did anyone ever find copies of the communiques or other hard evidence that Sickles had in fact asked for permission to move? Did Colonel Batchelder ever uncover any information specific to this exchange between Sickles and Meade? Can Sickles' claim be proven wrong? It's a lot of stuff in there.
So thanks, and let me try.
He's vying for 6 questions his job, but he's breaking it up into 2 questions, but just throwing a bunch of questions in there.
3 really, really long questions. Yeah, I think that's probably right.
All right, go ahead.
So let me kind of break that down. First of all, Meade's orders to Sickles were verbal. So there's no written orders to go back to. Later that morning, or earlier in the morning of July 2nd, we're saying goodbye here in the studio. So we'll see you next time. So I told you this was going to run long. So they're verbal.
Yeah.
Captain Meade comes to Sickles' bivouac in the morning of July 2nd.
Captain Meade, George's son.
George Jr., comes to Sickles' bivouac, verbal conversation. Eventually, by about 11 a.m. or so, Sickles goes to Meade's headquarters, verbal. So, the thrust of the question here, Where these survive are in the memoirs and the post-war accounts. If you read Meade's Life and Letters, they talk about, what was said and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, that's all we got to go with. Because on the ground, they were verbal.
Right. So when a verbal order would come in, or a request, let's say, would come to headquarters, General Sickles requests permission to do blah, 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 blah. Is that logged? Is it supposed to be logged, I guess is what I should say, that someone from Sickles came?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the back and forth verbal stuff is, and again, I can't speak for all the staff officer functions. Verbal, not necessarily. Obviously the great stuff we have today is, 27 Part 3 of the ORs where you have all the or not all, but a lot of the correspondence that goes back and forth. But a lot of the verbal stuff doesn't necessarily have to be, otherwise you might be logging that all day, right?
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah. Okay, Ray Stow, he wants to know, why was he considered for an officer's position after pleading insanity in his court case? You brought attention to this earlier when we were talking about it, but if you just want to give a final answer to that.
A final answer. He didn't plead insanity. I don't think it was really looked upon as, oh my God, this guy's crazy and we're giving him 10,000 men. I don't think they looked at it that way.
Right.
What they did look at it like is, well, the guy who slayed Barton Key and took his, wife back, we're giving men of such low character command. I think it was looked at more like that than,
so there was some negative.
Yeah. And like I said before, looking like Frank Haskell's account, or Frank Haskell does some Sickles bashing, and he kind of goes along that vein. But again, why was he considered for an officer's position? Because Lincoln liked him.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of it.
Yeah, and he was a congressman. He had connections.
Connections, right. All that stuff. Yeah.
If I was a congressman, believe me, I'd be a lieutenant general. Okay.
God help us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Don't ever vote me into Congress. Yeah. John Reynolds wants to know, today, just the mention of Dan Sickles' name sparks debate among students of the battle. When viewed by his contemporaries, was he just as polarizing? Other than Queen Isabella of Spain, who else liked him?
I like it. So we throw in other than the Queen of Spain, who liked him.
Right.
Who liked him? We've touched on it today. The Lincolns, David Birney, Joe Hooker, Dan Butterfield, Regis de Trobriand, James Buchanan, James Longstreet, Chaplain Joe Twitchell. I mean, he had a chaplain in his corner.
Well,
Man
we all know they never do anything bad.
Sickles. Exactly. So there were certainly a lot of people in his corner, but as part of the question says here, yes, he was polarizing, and again, over the years, as he made more and more, or at least repeated, the same old accusations against General Meade, more and more of Meade's friends over the years were like, oh, wait a minute, cut this crap out, kind of thing. And that certainly put other people against Sickles as well. So.
Okay, so I got one more question. Well, does he have any living relatives?
Not direct.
Okay.
Not direct. Now, all of the time we come across Sickle, Sickel, Van Sickles, and all. We've seen a lot of permutations of that over the years, and I'm friends with a lot of them on Facebook. So I think between other branches of the family, his direct lineage died out, although there's apparently also some in Europe who might be descended from his daughter, but I guess Europeans don't have any interest
they don't count
in what we do. But let me give a shout out to John Shoud of Long Island, who is Sickles' great grandnephew.
Okay.
Now you might think, what the hell? What is a great grandnephew kind of thing? It's kind of descended from his sisters from the father's second marriage. Yeah. It's kind of a convoluted tree, but John Shoud is the unabashed Sickles family historian. He's got some great stories, so let's give John a shout out.
Okay, so there is a living relative, just not direct descendants.
Yeah, not direct, yeah.
And that was John Weir that wanted to know that. And then this one here I think is a good one, and we're going to end with this one here. Okay. Robert Maggie, he says, admittedly biased about the guy, my question is, how much did Lincoln and the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War buy into Sickles' story, especially as it affected the Meade hearings, aside from giving him the Medal of Honor?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And in all of our talk today, we didn't get into a lot of detail in the Joint Committee on the conduct of the war. Certainly, first of all, I think people in my opinion, should back up. We call it the Meade hearings. The Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War had a much broader agenda than just taking a hatchet to George Meade.
Right.
They had the radical Republicans had a certain view on how they thought the war effort should be run. And Meade happened to be one of the people that they didn't like. But it wasn't like this whole apparatus was set up to get George Meade. And I want to point that out because I think Gettysburg aficionados just always make that focus a little too narrow. But having said that, the guys running the Joint Committee, I think certainly did buy into the Sickles line.
Right.
Meade wanted to retreat. Maybe Meade preferred to fight in Maryland, Pipe Creek, and all of that stuff. And I think when you read, though, the Joint Committee's final report on Meade and final report on Gettysburg, I think they're more critical, and I think spend more time talking about the quote-unquote inability to capture Lee's army at Williamsport, in places like that, which of course, Sickles wasn't there and didn't have a lot to do with that. But short answer, they did buy into the Sickles version of it. And what I always remind people, because people get, oh my God, this destroyed Meade's reputation. No, it didn't. Meade stayed, he took some shots.
Sure.
He stayed in command of the Army of the Potomac for the remainder of the war.
Right.
Lincoln might have bought into some of it, but it wasn't enough to replace Meade. And, ultimately, as we know, when Grant comes east in 1964, he keeps Meade in command of the Army of the Potomac for the remainder of the war. So there might have been people who kind of thought, that Meade, he's a good man, maybe a little timid sort of thing, but this didn't, quote-unquote, destroy Meade like we always make it out to be. Because it's a better Gettysburg story to imagine this big congressional committee ending Meade's career, savaging his reputation. And if you read it all, in my opinion, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
But
And the record of what Meade actually did, I think, represents him well.
Yeah, exactly. And stand on the record.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think it does represent well. Yeah, I agree.
Now Sickles' record.
Well, Sickles' record is a colorful one, Matt.
It's a colorful one.
Circling back to where we were 3 hours ago. Colorful yet controversial.
Yes. No, I know.
Light and dark.
And he's got plenty of both, which we all do. And I'm a lot more into Sickles now after this one. I got to say, you're turning me around.
I swear to God, I thought he was going to say you're turning me on. So I was a little.
Well, to be honest, with how this conversation has gone so far today, it wouldn't be a stretch.
I know. Hey, we had 2 weeks off, and it feels good to be back. We're back to recording.
But can I get a last word in?
Of course.
Just kind of a closing statement.
Yes.
There's a misconception. I don't care if people like Dan Sickles, because, people will come up to me after these talks and say, well, that was enjoyable, young man, but I still don't like him. And I'm not asking people to like him. Do I find Sickles interesting? Yeah. But as a historian, all we're trying to do is, break through any of the myths, try to get to the truth of the matter. And I think, as we've said a couple of times, people have good and bad in them.
Yeah.
Some people might have more bad than good, and that would certainly qualify for Sickles. But this is not an attempt to make excuses for him or to like him. It's just really
the facts of the case.
Try to get to understand why things happen.
I think, honestly, the one thing that kind of, as you're telling all these stories, that kind of just makes me smirk is that the guy seemed to have a lust for life. Everything life had to offer.
That's my point.
Right?
He lived.
He liked whiskey.
Yep.
Cigars.
Yeah.
Women.
Yeah.
Controversy.
Yeah.
The thrill of controversy.
If he were alive today, he'd be podcasting.
He'd be.
Please.
Indeed.
Yeah, he would. He would have taught Howard Stern how to do Howard Stern if he was alive.
Maybe he and Meade would have opposing podcasts.
Oh, they'd be like Hannity and Combs.
Maybe, maybe it would be like addressing Gettysburg in the Battle of Gettysburg podcast.
Yeah.
A heated rivalry.
Right, like Meade has one.
The two shows. It's all kinds of opportunities here.
Well, and that's funny because we joke about that, where it's the fans of the shows that think that there's a rivalry or want there to be a rivalry or something like that.
You and I just have dinner the other night.
And we just had dinner the other night,
bread.
right before the holiday, or during the holiday season. I don't remember
exactly.
exactly.
What the hell? Why don't I ever get invited to this?
Because you never come out.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. We weren't supposed to mention that.
No, we weren't.
Right?
It was top secret. No, we went to talk about the Little Bighorn thing. Hash out ideas for that. But anyway, but when we were there, and we were sitting and eating and talking and everything like that. And I would imagine that maybe Sickles and Meade weren't sitting and eating after the war, and hanging out like that. But they had to be professional with each other in certain situations, I'm sure, for the few days that Meade was commanding him. Right. And, you got to do that. But we don't hate each other, and our fans hate each other.
But ironically, there are a lot of the same fans. So do they hate themselves?
Those don't count. Those don't count.
Yeah, so you don't differentiate.
I'm talking about the ones that think you have to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
And then they go around the internet and say whatever.
The beer gardens of Steinway Avenue. Yeah, gone up and down.
Yeah. Good old Alex. for those,
Alex.
I won't say his last name, but for those of you who don't know, there's this guy who listens to both of our shows, and
he's listening right now. I'm sure.
I'm sure he is. And after one of the tours over the summer that we did, our Get Out of the Car tours, he shows up in a Battle of Gettysburg podcast uniform.
He had the T-shirt, the socks.
He had the T-shirt, the socks,
awesome.
the backpack, the hat.
And what's wrong with that?
Nothing.
Battle of Gettysburg.podcast store?
Because he was at the addressinggettysburg.com event.
But he was at my morning tour, and he wanted to hang out with you.
I know. And then the following month, another guy showed up with a Battle of Gettysburg podcast shirt on, and I sent him a picture. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're sending your spies out.
Right. Is it not enough that you have the Tim Smith shirt, making
No, it's never enough. It'll never be enough.
Country. Is that not enough?
Tim loves that shirt, and people go into the Farnsworth house and ask if they can get it there.
Sure.
We're trying to get them a bulk number of shirts. No. But my point is, ladies, the listeners, they're the ones that, not all of them, of course, but there's a faction of the listeners that think it's one or the other. You can't do both. You have to like one over the other.
That's right.
And we say to you, poo-poo. And we say to all of the rest of you, thank you for listening to this inaugural or opening episode of Season 5, number 50. Jim Hessler, Dan Sickles. Pretty good stuff. Thank you very much.
It was fun. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me, and we'll figure out what to come back for visit number 6.
Yeah. Oh, well, pick a charge.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you all for listening. We made it.
All right. Yeah. How long was that?
17 hours. Need a Corps badge or other insignia for your uniform? Then check out the Badgemaker. Here's what some of his satisfied customers had to say. Miranda said, I ordered an identification disc from Joe and it's fantastic. He hand-stamped it exactly as I wanted. Greg said, my unit has purchased from him in the past quality badges and good service. And Jerry S. says, the Badgemaker is the go-to place for accurate replica Civil War badges. So go to CivilWarCorpsBadges.com and attach a message with your order saying you heard about him on Addressing Gettysburg.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Garryowen in glory. Instead of spa or drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man forget shall go to jail from Garryowen in glory. Instead of spa or drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man forget shall go to jail from Garryowen.